Hey guys, welcome to the fourth Ikea Pokemon Draft Tournament. Uh, it was just an intro video to the draft I'm doing here with Ben,
Hey, what's up?
and we're going to go through who's playing in the tournament and do a little analysis of each of their teams, just as a bit of fun. So, in this tournament, we have 9 players. That's me, Lucas, at the top. It's commanding the team of Glasgow Garchomp. Atlantis Aegislash is Jake. Tom A, Abyssal Reef Avalog. Tom B, Meridan's Massive Melmetal. Ben here is with Chesic Green Chestnut. Dan is piloting Sheldon Snorlax. Harry, also known as Hazfactor, is piloting Fukushima Fidget. Tom S is New Forest Noibat. And then Abo at the bottom there is Purdue Wooloo. So, to avoid talking about my own team first, I think we'll start from the bottom with Abo's team. And so, for our draft, the rules we have is you have 110 points, uh, and we have our own tier list, which we pointed our Pokemon in a way which we see fit, roughly, to select up to at least 10 and up to 12 Pokemon. And you can see most people have drafted 10, but there's a few that
Yeah,
have drafted more.
there's been a clear strategy throughout the draft from most participants.
Yeah, we've seen, I think, for this draft league definitely several more top heavy drafts, but then there's a few balanced ones in there. And for this analysis video, we in the rules we give people up to 2 trades, as you can see on the right here. Pokemon that are colored in grey are ones that are going to be traded out, and the trade happens. It comes into effect the week after. So we are, as of recording, before the start of week one's battles, so that these trades will come into effect from week 2 onwards and for the rest of the draft. So we're going to include them because that's basically how people's teams are going to look for the vast majority of the draft. So starting with Abo's team, um, he has basically 8 Pokemon, which is fair enough. I don't think it's a super top heavy draft, although he does have 3 Pokemon above 17 points.
You lose out a bit on the unpredictability
Yeah,
because
it's easier to
he's
prepare for sure.
every week's going to have Diancie and Baxcalibur, and I don't see a week where he doesn't bring them.
Yeah, but I mean, in exchange for that, you do get to fill your draft out with very scary Pokemon. I mean, starting with Diancie, even before it megas, it's still a usable Pokemon, although a slightly different style. But Diancie is like ridiculous attacking stats. 160 each, I think, and 110 speed is pretty good. It is his fastest Pokemon. Nothing above 110. I mean, it hurts a little bit, but you've always got Scarf to get around that. And I think his speed tiers are pretty decent. He has variety levels. His Araquanid is his slowest, not counting his level 1 picks, of course, because I don't know, I doubt Abbo's going to bring them ever. Maybe Vulpix for a cheeky snow set for Baxcalibur.
He has ways to boost his speed though. Baxcalibur's got Dragon Dance, which can turn
Yeah,
it into a really powerful late game threat.
yeah, Baxcalibur really doesn't need many turns to get going, especially the fact that it's just immune to getting burnt thanks to thermal exchange
Yeah, I
means
picked
that
it last
it's
season, and it was just a threat every game.
you really only need unless an opposite unless the opposing team has something that's really good against it, you really only need like one boost to start sweeping with like Glaive Rush or Loaded Dice, Icicle Spear or something like that.
Mm.
I'm talking about boosting. Diancie Mega gets Rock Polish as well, so after one of those, it's gonna be uncatchable basically.
It's also
Um,
hard to break through with the magic bounce and the diamond storm, giving it +2 defense,
hmm
50%
Yeah,
chance.
talking about Magic Bounce. I mean, he only has one form of hazard removal, which is defog on Rotom Wash, but just having Magic Bounce on his team makes it quite hard and a lot more unlikely that an opponent is going to want to try to set up rocks or stuff like that without having a dedicated Diancie counter to begin with.
We do have to speak how it is 4 times weak to steel, and quite often steel types are the rock setters, so at least they have that them going
Uh,
for them.
yes, and not being able to tear out for two reasons. Obviously, means it can't shake that steel weakness, but um, it's probably not the biggest deal. I mean, there's not a huge amount of super fast steel Pokemon going around, so it could be
And
all
he
right with that.
he has some good pivots into steel. Rotom
Yeah,
Wash and Victini could even take a steel hit and retaliate.
yeah. Like Rotom Wash being quad resisting steel is very nice. As with its like while it has mediocre HP, it's got good like defensive stats. So if you invest in it, it can take quite a few hits, and stab Hydro Pump is not great to deal with, and it can just volt switch into something better. And yeah, you mentioned Victini, ridiculous power on his V create, like 180 base power means it's just very hard to sort of have a Pokemon that really takes that and feels good about it. And then it can, well, yeah, if you're running a Choice Scarf Victini, you're gonna have to hard swap, but you can either do that or just like I think it gets U-turn to pivot out.
You've also got experience with Iron Crown as well, right?
Yeah, Iron Crown. I didn't actually find a huge amount of success with it last time, but it is good. It's got a great ability to set up for itself, as well as just the fact that it's a Quark Drive Pokemon means it can always run Booster Energy, Calm Mind, Agility, and all that. It can really set up quite easily into just a sweeper that can't be revenge kill because it has pretty good base stats that make it hard to kill in one shot.
And
And
he's done
even
something here. He's got Electric Terror type, and he's got Volt Switch,
yeah,
so
I'm
that
not
might
too
work quite
sure
well as
about
a
the
pivot.
electric terror type. I'm not sure what that really covers, but you know, I'm sure Abo
I
has his
think it's
reasons.
purely offensive on a Volt Switch team.
I mean, yeah, it is more of an offensive Pokemon. I mean, it can run as well as the setup sets. You can run stuff like Assault Vest and like Future Sight to just make it an offensive pivot that can deal damage to anything that wants to swap in on the later turns.
I think that is something that's been punished with this draft. A lot of people have drafted top heavy, and due to the rule that only Pokemon that are 13 points or below can Terra,
Hmm.
they're gonna not want to bring their Terra captains every week. So you're always gonna know which Pokemon's gonna Terra each week.
Yep, yep, that's very true. As for the rest of his draft, Araquanid is a decent Pokemon. Its main sort of gimmick is sticky webs and also water bubble, giving it a deceptively scary liquidation. Um, and it's got a decent bulk as well, like 132 base special defense. I mean, it can take definitely a few hits. 42 speed is not the best, but it doesn't really need to outspeed a lot of things it's dealing with. It just sort of sets sticky webs and either liquidations or gets out of there and lets the rest of the team do its work. And sticky webs certainly helps with not having anything above 120 speed, so he can afford to not run Scarf sometimes if he's uh, relying on sticky webs.
I'm not sure what the Miss Magius is here for,
Miss
but I'm
Maze is
not too familiar
actually
with it.
for 8 points. Like it's not they're very expensive. It does quite a bit. It has a really, as I was looking it up the other day, quite a deep like utility move pool. Obviously, being a ghost type, it'll get stuff like Will-O-Wisp.
Got Thunder Wave, it's got Taunt,
Thunderwave
Trick.
as
Yeah, I'm
well.
looking into it now.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Like 105 base speed means it can outspeed a lot of things that it's gonna want to taunt. Um, it's like top. I guess I don't know called top three stats. It's HP, attack, and defense. I mean, it doesn't really care about attack, but HP and defense are pretty pitiful at 60 both. But with 105 special defense, it can technically take a special hit or two sometimes. And as an offensive Pokemon, 105 special attack is definitely workable, and I think it can run a nasty plot as well if it was trying to set up against a slower team or the slower remains of an enemy team. And it has 3 immunities with Levitate and being a ghost type Pokemon. So I think it could definitely get some work done. It's also another one of his Terra Captains,
Mhm.
Fighting Steel.
I'm not exactly sure what those types cover. The fighting is a Dark Resist, but
Fighting Dark Resist. What is
Steel's
his
just a
best type?
generically good type. Maybe that's why he's picked it.
Probably. I mean, you're never really going to be too sad about picking Steel as a Terra type, in my opinion.
Overall,
Yeah,
I quite like Abo's team.
I
He's
think it's
got
come along quite well. Yeah.
he's got the late game threats to sweep up with Excalibur or Twiskar Fictini, and he has a strategy to deal with his low speed with the Araquanid Sticky Web start. And Diancie is just a threat you always have to have in mind when you are thinking about dealing with his team.
Yeah. In terms of typing, is slight weakness to Rock and Ghost because he's only got one resist in there, but I mean I wouldn't be too worried about that. Iron Crown resists Rock, and that's bulky, so that can definitely take a hit or two. And then Wo Chen is his Ghost resist, and Wo Chen's it's pretty bulky, and it can just sort of be rather
Oh, it's leech seeds that can be very irritating if you've only got physical attackers into it.
yeah, thanks to what Tablets of Ruin or whatever that lowers
Tablets of Ruin, yeah.
your attack, and Cantera to get rid of its quad weakness, which is nice. Okay,
Okay.
I think that's enough talking about Abo's team. Let's move on to Tom S. Now, talking about a top heavy team, Tom S. Not nothing against the draft, but he drafted a top heavy team before and he's done it again.
I
So
think this is the most top heavy we have ever seen. He's
potentially,
practically only got 7 Pokemon.
yeah. But I do think this draft is certainly better than his last. I can't remember exactly what Pokemon he had before, but I remember not being too scared of it. But this one, I think he's got a pretty well-rounded team
Mhm.
with his 7 picks. So he has, I think, I think that we got 3 very fast teams in this draft, and this is the first that we're going to cover. With the trade for Tornadus T, he has Lopunny, Mega, and Spectra all have over 120 speed. So he has really fast Pokemon up there. He doesn't really have
Katana.
anything through the middle. What are you gonna say about Katana?
Oh, Katana's speed isn't bad either. He's still got over 100 on Katana and Garchomp, and 100 is really the baseline you need to hit over for a fast Pokemon.
Yeah. So he has good speed for his fast Pokemon. Absolutely nothing in the middle until you get to Toxapex at 35 and Hatterene at 29. And then I don't know what the 1 pointers are, but I can't imagine it's particularly good.
So that's really good because he's always going to be moving first. The only downside is if people know that they can't beat his speed tiers, they can just not bother investing in speed and they can put it all in bulk to try and take his hits a bit better.
Yeah, and also being so fast, you can get caught out. It's more of a mental issue than an actual like stats issue. But if you're expecting to outspeed things all the time, you can get blindsided by choice scarfs, which has definitely happened in the past for some people. And I mean, Katana, it's 109, which is fast, but I mean, as we've said in the past, it's not as fast as it could be. So it can definitely get overtaken if it's not boosting its speed by some faster offensive threats. Um,
Now,
yeah.
paradoxically, here I want to talk about his first draft. One of his slowest Pokemon, Hatterene, probably the best Trick Room setter with an amazing ability, Magic Bounce.
It's a pretty good pick for 11 points. I think in all. I mean, it's certainly one of Thomas's favorite Pokemon. He drafted it last time and got a great use out of it. It's a surprising Pokemon. You look at it and you don't expect it to do super well. You sort of see Magic Bounce, you're like, oh, that's pretty good, but then you see 57 HP, you're like, oh, it's not really tanky. But then you try and hit it with something and it lives, and you're like, what's going on here? And then it sets Trick Room on you, or it hits you with some sort of stab fairy
The
move with its
Draining Kiss as well can
yeah
also.
136 special attack to really punch quite large holes in an opposing team for an only 11-point Pokemon. And as we see from the draft, he only really has 2 proper options for Terra Captains, and he's chosen both of them. Even though I don't think Toxapex is the greatest choice, but we'll get back to that. But yeah, Hatterene pretty flexible. It gets some good supportive moves as well. It gets Nuzzle, I think, as well as Thunderwave, and so it can spread status as well as just
Yeah, it is
being there.
a pain in some teams to
It
break
is.
through.
I think his second best special wall. I mean, Toxapex can cover either physical or special. But outside of that, his team has a little bit of a struggle on the special side, and Hatterene has decent special defense, but there's a chance that if he's not careful, he could get run over by some sort of special sweeper. But we'll have to see what happens in terms of that. I mean, I'm talking about special defenses. Kartana, absolutely nothing on that side, but ridiculous 181 base attack. I mean, I don't know any Pokemon that have higher than that really. And with Beast Boost as well as like Swords Dance, it can just go like it can
or
sweep.
even a scarf. It's
Yeah, Scarf and Beast Boost, you get one KO on it, and it's off to the races. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely one you have to be on top of straight away.
in similar to how we were talking about Baxcalibur before. Uh, Unfortunately, I mean, Grass Steel, it's not the greatest defensive typing, but it gets the job done. And while its special defense is, I mean, non-existent to say the least, it does have good base defense, 131. So it can take some hits, and it's less scared about priority moves, at least the physical priority moves. So that's good for it.
Those vacuum waves are going to destroy it.
Garchomp is next. Garchomp, a Pokemon that has been drafted. Has it been drafted every time?
It is very popular,
It's
and it
popular
is for a
for good
reason.
reason. It's a very a usable Pokemon basically. It does most of what you'd want it to do. It has great base stats that can sort of go into anything. Dragon Ground's great typing if you ignore the 4x weakness to ice, but you kind of can ignore that a lot of the time. Like Ground is a great offensive type. Dragon's pretty good offensive type.
Also has Toxapex, which is a great swap into an ice move.
Yes, this is correct. Um, what else? Yeah, it can sweep with stuff like Dragon. I think it gets Dragon Dance. It gets Sword Stance for
No,
sure.
no, it doesn't have Dragon
Not
Dance.
the
This
Dragon
is
Dance,
the issue I always have with
but it
Garchomp. It
gets
couldn't
Scale
boost its
Shot
speed,
now.
but now it's got Scale Shot
Yeah,
since Gen 8.
so that's pretty good. It can sweep with Scale Shot and like Sword Stance. It can Wall Break. Sword Stance. It gets utility. It can tank. Rough Skin is great for tanking physical attacks and dealing damage in return, building up incremental damage on the enemy team. It's pretty scary. And I think we'll probably see it most weeks, as for the rest of Tom Bess's team.
I think before we talk about Toxapex, we talk about Lopunny and Spectria.
Okay, yeah, Lopunny, another fast attacker. It's got like, Lopunny's good, but I do fear it's a little bit one-dimensional, especially as a mega at least. Like 135 base speed is fantastic. There's few things that are going to outspeed it that aren't going to be scarfed, and 136 attack is good. And
even before that, it's got the priority fake out to always get some
yes,
guaranteed damage alongside Scrappy.
priority stab, fake out, and being able to hit any type because of Scrappy is very nice. And like stab, high jump kick just puts out a lot of damage, and it can revenge kill very easily with that fake out, and the fact that its speed is so high, it can just, as I said, with rough skin, with this prior fake out, Tom has a great ways of building up just chip damage on the opposing team for like a Kartana or a Spectria sweep. So it works pretty well for that. I mean, it dies quite easily. Like it's not got great defensive stats, but at the same time, you don't really need it to be. It can pivot out and gets U-turn, so it doesn't have to worry about staying in to actually get hit.
Most of the time we see it, I think it's going to be faking out into a U-turn just to get that revenge kill and then swap into one of his more offensive threats.
And that's a very useful thing for Pokemon to do, to be honest. Now, let's not forget the other set, because we're allowing you to run megas that you've drafted without their Megastone. Klutz,
Oh, you're talking Klutz.
Klutz, Trick, or is it Switcheroo? I can't remember which one it gets. On base
Klutz,
Lopunny
Switcheroo, Assault Vest
is a very fun set, which I've wanted to run before, but maybe we'll see that come out. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully.
It's very niche.
It's great for shutting down any defensive Pokemon, basically. Like as long as it isn't just it's there to sit there and spam its stab moves. But We'll see. I hope he'll bring it out at some point. I don't know. And you said Spectria next. I mean, basically what we said for
There's
Katana,
one
but
thing.
what are you saying?
There's one thing you can say about Spectria, really.
Mm-hmm.
Fast, hits hard, doesn't have coverage.
Yes, it's similar to Katana. It's fast, faster than Katana by a decent margin, and it gets a boosting ability. It gets Grim Neigh, so only needs one KO to start picking up speed. You mentioned its coverage. It's still bad, but it got better this gen. I think it got Psychic and what is it, Draining Kiss this gen, so it went up
Oh yeah,
to
Training Kiss.
2 types that it can hit with to 4. So it's still not great, but it's actually a lot better than it was before.
It definitely makes the nasty plot sets more viable, whereas before I think I would have always scarfed it personally.
I see.
Not or specs.
I think Spectrum might have been like kind of a bargain at 17 points because it forces so much preparation. Like you can't really afford to. In a similar way to Pokemon we mentioned before, Katana Basket and other stuff, you can't really afford to hesitate in front of Spectria if it starts picking up speed, if it gets a free nasty plot off or something like that. It's really gonna not much is gonna slow it down. It has like a base 100 HP, so like as well as being naturally immune to
Fighting in normal.
fighting in normal, so like half the priority attacks in the game, maybe even more than half. I don't know how many exactly, but it's hard to stop once it gets going.
Something needs to be said, seeming as Tom already has a high density of offensive threats. This also can be decent support. It's a very fast
Mm-hmm.
Will-O-Wisp taunt user, and it's
Yes.
even got Haze if you need to stop a setup.
Yeah, and the fact is, like, you don't really need to run much coverage on it because, well, it doesn't have it, first of all, and
We all know how effective spamming Ghost type moves is.
yeah, against a team that doesn't have an answer, so you have those extra move slots to take stuff like the taunt and the Will-O-Wisp. Okay, so
And finally, Toxapex.
well, not finally. We got Toxapex and Tornadus T to talk about.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot about Tornadus. Your choice?
Toxapex. What?
Whoever
Okay.
you want to speak about.
I was talking about Toxapex. It's
Okay.
good. I think it's fallen a little bit from where it used to be, and I don't think that's any fault of its own. To be honest, I think maybe things around it have gotten stronger, but it's a really good blanket check to a lot of attacking threats. I mean, Poison Water is a pretty good defensive type. It doesn't care about much apart from electric and ground, I think, and psychic, I guess. I think that's
Yeah.
all. But even then, like it's got fantastic mixed defenses. It's got Regenerator, like one of the best abilities in the game. It's got it can't be toxic itself because it's poison type, which is a great thing for a tank wall to have. It's got Recover,
It's got those toxic spikes.
toxic spikes. It's got toxic itself, so it wins most wall versus wall matchups, I guess, probably.
And because we're in Nat decks, it has Skulls back.
Yes. So overall, for only 12 points, it can answer most things. Now, it's a little bit passive against Pokemon that don't care about Skull, don't care about Toxic, like especially stuff like Steel types. They can abuse it a little bit, take advantage of it doesn't really do anything other than that. But against everything else, you press Toxic, you start pressing like Baleful Bunker, or even just switch out into a different Pokemon, and it's gonna ruin the enemy's day.
Hmm. Oh, I know how hard this thing is to break. I wanted it on my team personally
Yeah,
before
well,
it was
you've used it
stolen away.
before, right?
Yeah, I used it before. I used it alongside Quagsire, and the two of them together
Was that
seemed to be really
2 draft
difficult to
leagues
deal
ago?
with. Yeah, it
Yeah, it
was.
was.
Yeah, Draft League 2.
And lastly, but not leastly, Tornadus T, another just it's an interesting one. I've used this before, and I'll admit I probably didn't get great use out of it. This was the same draft league as the one you had Toxapex in. But the third Pokemon on his team that hits above 120 base speed with just above 121, and usable, pretty good mixed attacking stats, I'd say, and average bulk, but alongside regenerator and a pretty decent sort of utility move set, it can just sort of fit as the glue, as we like to put it, of a team. It can just fly around and do what it wants to do, really. It can mold itself to fit sort of whatever niche Tom might need to look for in a particular matchup. And for only
Notably,
16 points.
flying type resists the ground type moves Toxapex is weak to, so it's a pretty good switch out.
It more than resists. It's immune to it, yeah. And he's trading away Tinglu. I mean, Tinglu is a strong Pokemon, but I can see why he'd want to get rid of it. He already has the ground type in Garchomp, and while it has good base attack, it's a little bit passive. But though it is very bulky with Vessel of Ruin
Tornado's
and the 12
got
HP.
Was Bleak Windstorm a new added move from Legends Arceus, or is I'm not too good on the
It's
genies.
pretty new. It's basically Hurricane with 10 more accuracy, 10% more accuracy, but
10% less power.
it trades 10 power, and instead of confusing, it lowers speed at 30%, I think.
I'm interested to see how that'll do.
I think it's kind of just run Hurricane, to be honest. That's what I'd prefer, but I don't know. If he really needs the accuracy, then Bleak Windstorm can come in clutch, I think.
Okay.
As a
Any
whole,
final remarks?
I think the team's pretty well set up. I mean, he's gonna be a pain to build around, because like you have threats there that you just constantly have to think about. Like if he swaps in Kartana now, do I lose? If he swaps in Spectria now, do I lose? In terms of typing, his team is pretty well rounded.
He is
Uh,
definitely on the front foot. You cannot afford to misstep against Tom's team.
yeah, for sure. He's a bit sad to lack some flying ghost and ice weaknesses, and maybe a tad bit of ground as well, but resists even, not weaknesses. But I doubt there's ever gonna be much of a point where Tom's team doesn't have either the advantage or he's lost. I mean, he's a very he'll be moving very fast. I think it's not a slow play team. It's a I'm gonna kill you as fast as possible sort of team, and I think it's gonna do quite well in terms of that, at least hopefully.
Yeah, I'm already quite scared for my match versus Tom.
Okay, next, Harry's team. So Harry's team, it started quite interestingly, with the Beedrill Mega pick into Ditto and Mew. I think he'll admit himself he didn't really know what the fuck he was doing.
Well, he's picked the Pokemon that learn all the moves, really.
Yeah, well, that's the first thing you see when you see this team. You see Ditto, Mew, and Smeargle. He just has three Pokemon that can do whatever you want them to. I mean, especially Mew. Pokemon can fill literally any role, and that is what it's good at. 14 points is really not a lot to pay for a Pokemon that can do whatever you want it to, and do it pretty well with 100 base stats in every stat. So
Versatility is definitely his team's strength.
versatility to a certain extent, yes. He definitely some tricky ones in here, as we said. Those three. Darkrai is tricky to play around, and I mean, we'll just talk about the individual Pokemon, I guess. So he's trading out Beedrill, Mega, and Minion, so I don't think we need to mention them much. Moltres and Swellow are the incoming ones. So starting with Moltres, it's I've seen him use it a lot recently because he's been practicing perhaps, but good stats as with all like the sort of legendaries of that type. It's got a pretty good spread, and with Flame Body, it can really punish sort of careless contact
Physical
attacks
attack.
from opposing teams. Anything that attacks into it and gets burnt, or any physical attack that gets burnt by it, is gonna be not happy about that, to say the
I mean,
least.
it's a tried classic. I don't think I've ever seen Moltres and not been scared of it, because
Yeah, and
it's resilient and it hits hard.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. As unlike quite a few other switch-ins of its ilk, 125 base special attack means it can hit back at pretty good force with its own fire type moves. But it's a pretty good all-round Pokemon. It does suffer from a quad rock weakness, so I doubt we're probably ever gonna see Harry not
It's going to be
run
wearing its
boots.
boots.
I'm talking about, actually, that's something I forgot to talk about on Tom S's team. Much really was the magic bounce on Hatterene, similarly to Abo's team. Really, really dissuades hazards, but we'll move on from that. Yeah, Moltres is pretty good. I think, especially for 11 points, it serves its role pretty solidly, and you can adapt it to quite well.
It's
Ditto,
very consistent.
yes, it's consistent. That's a good way of putting it. Ditto is a Pokemon that we've seen a few times before. Um,
Ditto's one of my personal favorite Pokemon. I love how it stops setup sweepers in their tracks.
yes. Uh, Similar to what we mentioned before about Kartana and Spectre, about something that you always have to consider and think about when building your team. Ditto, it's really hard to run setup Pokemon into a team with Ditto because it will just swap in and outspeed your setup Pokemon and probably kill it. Now,
It it has the effect I love where even in the team builder, when he doesn't bring Ditto, it's
mhm,
still already done its part and had an effect on your team.
yes, exactly. It is limited. It's not the perfect Pokemon like Transform. It gives it 5 PP for its moves, I believe.
Yeah,
And chances
and
are
you
you're probably
often
going to be
scarf
running
it.
Scarf, so you only get 5 uses. Um, but even
5 uses is
then,
enough.
if you switch, if your opponent is careless and starts being like, "Oh man, I've just got my agility nasty plot off. Time to sweep." Here comes Ditto to ruin your day and take the win back for Harry.
Also, stealing things like Regenerator can mean it lasts a lot longer than you think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Even
Uh,
perhaps running Assault Vest on it means that it can use the rest of its moves, and it'll be much tankier against like a special attacker that it wants to copy.
the only issue with Assault Vest is it does keep its original HP stat,
Mm-hmm.
so you're going to be getting 300 HP.
Yeah. And then Mew, which we sort of mentioned before, does anything. So
He's got both the Pokemon that can learn Transform.
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
that, that's one of my favorite sets is the Imprison Transform set.
Smeagol not learn transform as well.
I don't believe it can.
Oh, okay. I don't know about that one.
Oh wait, yeah, it can.
Okay, so
But
it has all three then.
Smeagol only has base 55 HP, whereas Mew with Transform has
That's true.
100.
100 base, which is very nice. Yeah, I don't want to talk much about Mew. There's you could talk about Mew forever because it can do anything. So
I'm on the showdown page, and you can just scroll down its moves.
mhm. Next, an outgoing Minior. He might use that week one. We'll have to see. Nice little Shell Smash sweeper. But instead, what I think we'll see quite a bit of is his Swellow. I know quite a favorite of Harry at the moment. Harry's at the moment, and I've used it in the past on his recommendation, and it is quite an effective Pokemon. Even more these days, thanks to Terrestrialization. A Terra normal boosted Choice Specs Boom Burst from Swellow tears quite a large hole in a lot of teams, especially with Scrappy, which means that you
The
cannot
Scrappy on it.
switch Ghost types into it, which may catch some people off guard. It seems we'll have to see if they take that into account during the battle or not. But I've seen Swallow do some nasty things, and 125 base speed means that it's gonna be able to hit first with its Boom Burst against the vast majority of Pokemon, especially ones that aren't scarfed.
The only downside I see is other than Boom Burst, there's not too much you can do with it.
Yeah, it is quite one dimensional, unfortunately. And base 75 special attack means you do have to run specs really if you're going for the Boom Burst set. There's a small chance, we never know with Harry. He does like the off the wall sets with its other ability, Guts. He could run a flame orb and a physical set.
Hmm.
We'll have to see, I guess. But I think most of the time it's going to be that Specs Boom Burst, and it's going to do a lot of damage against anything that doesn't resist it.
I don't think there's
Next,
much else to be said.
no, I don't think so either. Next is Darkrai. Now, originally, I looked at Darkrai and I thought I don't really know what's going on with this Pokemon. I was like, it's a fast special attacker, but is it really worth 18 points? But after watching Harry use it, I can really see how kind of scary it is. Just hypnosis
Yeah,
is
Darkrai could flip a game.
really, really tricky to play around. Like most of the time, an opponent sends in a fast special attack. You go, okay, I'll switch into my pre-prepared answer to that. However, with Darkrai, you switch in your wall or whatever. He presses hypnosis. He gets free turns. He presses nasty plot. He presses a coverage move or whatever. Yeah, most of the time, I mean, 60% accuracy. It's a bit of a coin flip, but if that hypnosis hits, and with Bad Dreams doing a bit of incremental damage on the side, Darkrai can really overwhelm opposing teams. Basically, by forcing two switches in a row, he gets, and
So
most
much
likely,
momentum.
unless you're really thinking and playing around that hypnosis, the second switch is going to be from the Pokemon that best answered Darkrai. And a nasty plot boosted stab dark move, or one of its, I think, plethora of coverage attacks, is going to do a lot of damage. And a second 125 base speed. Oh, that's something I didn't mention. I think this is the second team with 3 Pokemon above 120 base speed. So a very fast team here.
Mm.
I briefly mentioned the speed tiers. They're actually pretty good. I think Harry's got a good coverage, a variety. He's got a nice little slow pivot in his Vaporeon, which I'm a big fan of.
I
It was
mean,
originally on my draft. That was.
Darkrai speaks for itself, though. It was one of the 2 Pokemon that got sleep banned in the most recent generations OU, and it did that for a reason.
Hmm.
He hits that hypnosis, you are in big trouble.
Yeah.
Now, onto the big dog.
Yes, Zamazenta Crowned. Probably. I mean, it's hard to say because it's not the highest point cost, but probably one of the strongest Pokemon that you can draft.
It is a
Uh,
box legendary.
yes, and ridiculous base stats. A great ability. The only thing you can really say that's bad about Zamazenta C is that it can't hold an item, uh, and the fact that it only has 4 move slots. Like,
Mm.
it is limited in that way, in so much that you are either running the sort of bulky iron defense body press set, in which you can only really afford to run one coverage move, or you're running full coverage, which means that you're not going to be able to boost your power. But
Hmm.
that's about all the bad things you can say about it. It's got, like, I mean, Fighting Steel, I think, pretty good typing, in my
Is a
opinion.
great offensive typing.
Great stats. 128 base speed, not much gets above that. Gets a +1 defense on its first switch in. What more can you want? It's even
Yeah,
like really heavy,
notably
so it gets a
the
really
Dauntless
strong heavy
Shield.
slap.
The Dauntless Shield was nerfed this generation, so it is only the one switch in. So if
Yeah.
you can force it to switch out, it becomes a lot weaker on its second swap. Especially those body presses,
Hmm.
they will be not hitting anywhere near as hard.
But with that iron defense set, all it needs is 1, maybe 2 iron defenses. I mean, against if your opponent's team doesn't have like a ghost type or something, then it's gonna be tricky to get around it. I mean,
Hmm.
there's not much else, I don't know, to really say that, to be honest. All right, Serena. Now this is an interesting one. I had never looked into Serena before Harry drafted it here, and
I quite like it. I've known about the Queenly Majesty for a while,
now what
which
does
is
Queenly
very
Majesty do?
interesting. Queenie Majesty, it and its allies are protected from priority moves,
Okay.
which means if you think someone's going to do a priority move, you can swap this in response.
I mean, I guess, yeah. But I think initially looking at it, you're like, oh, mono grass. It's not the fastest Pokemon. It's 72 base speed. It's a little bit slow,
Got the
but
legs though.
okay. Uh, but it's got rapid spin, which is always a valuable move for a Pokemon to have. I mean, Harry has 4 hazard control Pokemon on his team, so I don't think he's in any particular need for like want for that basically. But 120 attack is respectable. It gets U-turn. Uh,
It gets
it really
Trailblazed out.
it really sort of fits a nice little utility Pokemon niche, and I mean I don't know too much what to say about it because, as I said, I've never seen it been used before, but it doesn't look bad. I mean, it's kind of bulky, 72, 98, 98 defensive stats, and only 8 points. It's not too bad. It gets, I think, reasonably decent coverage. I think it's got triple axle high jump kick, and its stab power whip means that like it's certainly not passive. It can definitely hit back a decent ability. Probably, I assuming it gets synthesis. Yeah, it gets synthesis, so it can heal itself up if you're going for a more bulky set on it. I think it's really got some good usage. Yes, what are the utility? Knockoff and taunt and dual screens. It's got quite a bit of adaptability in it. So, I guess add that to the list of adaptable Pokemon that Harry has drafted.
I think your only struggle is going to be finding what 4 moves to put on it. It can run so many different sets each week.
Yes, that and the fact that it's a monograss. It's a bit of a detriment because we know that when he trades Minior, he's going to make Swellow his other Terra Captain, which is, I think, the right decision. But I think, yeah,
Grass,
this is
Grass
going to
hasn't ever been too bad of a defensive typing on its own.
offensive or defensive.
Defensive, sorry.
Uh, it's not great. I mean, electric and ground, and to a certain extent, water are valuable resists to have for sure. But being weak to like U-turn and fire is relatively common, and it could be
Especially
better.
in this draft.
Yeah. But enough talking about Serena. Next is Vaporeon, a Pokemon which I think I mentioned I wanted to draft. Originally, Harry stole it from me, the bastard. But it's a nice little bulky pivot Pokemon which can very easily Wish Pass, and it's a great Wish Passer at that with 130 base HP. It's got, as I said, it's got good HP, solid special defense, and pretty decent special attack. So it can even deal out some damage. I mean, last tournament, and well, now in this tournament, we have seen Aloma Mola, and I use that a lot. And while it's great for wish passing and slow pivoting, it doesn't do a huge amount on its own. Like you can hit like I think it gets Play Rough or a Liquidation or Waterfall or something like that, but it's not doing a lot of damage. Whereas Vaporeon, if you press Hydro Pump or I don't know if it gets Scald or not, but it can hit back hard. It's never going to be too passive. I think that's sort of a theme with Harry's team. None of these Pokemon are passive. They can all hit back quite hard.
Now, it's also got Water Absorb, which, as you'll see in the coming teams, is an ability I think is quite valuable in this draft, as there are some very strong water moves going to be thrown around in
sure.
certain games.
And it makes the ground terror type even better, removing one of its weaknesses. Now, it does only have 60 defense, so it's rather frail on the defensive side, and it's a little bit one-dimensional. Outside of Wish and some stab water moves and its flip turn or whatever, I don't think there's much else it's going to be doing. But at the same time, is there much else it really needs to do? I don't think so. I think it's pretty good. which is one of the reasons I
Like
wanted.
most of the EV evolutions, it can be used as a decent cleric set as well. They
Hmm.
all have heal bell, they all have wish, so passing some wishes, especially on 130 HP, is quite nice.
Yes. Uh,
Smeagol, do you want to cover this one? Because
S-
I don't want to talk for several days.
Smiggle, uh, is Smiggle. It does. I think it has almost every single move in the game. I
There are
think I'm
very
not.
few that
I'm
it
not
can't
sure
sketch.
what it
It can't
can't get,
sketch. It can't
but
sketch Darkrise Dark Void, which has been nerfed to be worse than Hypnosis anyway.
okay, great, fantastic news. It can't get Dark Void, but it can get anything else. It is only 3 points. There's hard to go wrong with a 3 point pick, and Smeagol, I think, is probably one of the better 3 point picks.
It's always tempting.
While its stats are dreadful,
There's
to be
there's
nice, it
things
actually
to be desired.
has 75 base speed, so it could be slower. And that's the only stat that it really cares about. With stuff like Spore and Nuzzle and all of the utility moves you could ever want, it's a fantastic lead. It's a fantastic like special answer to like any specific Pokemon that the opponent might have that you want to deal with. It can really just sort of fill, similarly to Mew, in so much that it can fill any niche you want. However, in terms of the niches, Mew can sort of be very broad in what it wants to be able to do. Smeagol's really good at picking exactly one thing and doing that really quite well. I think a lot of the time we're probably going to see either a Mew or a Smeagol lead from Harry. I think that's not unfair to say. Which he chooses is obviously matchup dependent. But I think he himself has fallen a little bit foul to a Nuzzle set on Smeagol, which is great because unlike Thunderwave, you can't taunt Nuzzle, which is very nice for Pokemon that have it.
My only concern is with Mew and Smeargle on the same team, is he gonna find himself leaning for Mew every single time?
Potentially, maybe. We'll have to see. I mean, I don't think that's such a bad thing if he does. He's got a good array of Pokemon to choose. I don't think any of the Pokemon that he's drafted are unusable by a long stretch.
I mean, 3 points even to deny other teams getting Smeargle is probably worth it.
That's true. I mean, it was his second last pick, so I'm not sure how much denying he's doing there. But yeah, at 3 points, like what else are you going to spend it on, really? I think that's pretty good. And then his last pick is Rhyperior, which is not a pick that I expected to see from Harry. I've never really heard Rhyperior come up in conversation before, but it's actually not bad. I always sort of discounted it, thinking like, oh, it's got terrible special defense, it's got 2 quad weaknesses. But these days, who cares about quad weaknesses? Hidden Power is banned for our tournament, one thing, and it's a Terra Captain. It's one of Harry's 3 Terra Captains. So shedding any semblance of quad weakness means that Rhyperior is really quite scary with the top half stats, as I like to call them, the HP, attack, defense, being very respectable. 115 HP is incredibly bulky, and 140 base attack is it's like sort of mega level or whatever. But and having a rock and ground stab and all three usable abilities, I think Rhyperior can get some serious work done, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Ground and Rock are amazing offensive types, and this actually has some pretty good synergy with Vaporeon, where it
Mm-hmm.
can block the
Yep.
electric types used against it, and then when you use a water type against this, straight back to Vaporeon.
Yep. Or even and both of those, as we mentioned, are Terra Captains. So like, you can either switch back and forth. You can switch into one, tear it to take the move that you would have switched for. There's a lot of tricky moves that I think those two can pull off together for a little 16 point package, less than you would have paid for a top tier Pokemon anyway, or only 1 point more than Beedrill Mega, which I'm avoiding talking about.
Now the downside, of course, is its low speed compared to
Hmm.
the rest of his team. But this does mean it covers those low speed matchups, so you can't just go under Harry's team.
Yeah, that's true. Low speed is a bit of a shame, and as I said before, low special attack means it really does have to worry about those special hits, even neutral ones. But that being said, it does get rock polish. So in the there's always the slight chance that Harry will run the Rhyperior rock polish set and take someone by complete surprise, uh, and sweep that way. So it's another thing to consider.
Um, any talk about team synergy?
Well, I think you mentioned it quite well before. The Vaporeon and Rhyperior work quite well together. Moltres gets mixed in there as well.
Mhm.
Obviously, Moltres' quad weakness to rock gets quite handily dealt with Rhyperior resisting rock. And I mean, if you ever want to switch something into rock, Zamazenta is a fantastic choice. Um,
How many weeks do we think he's going to bring all three of those Pokemon though, as they are quite
I don't know. I
then
think
they don't form an offensive threat, although they are a pretty good
Zamazenta is definitely
core.
offensive. Um, I think he's got a pretty good, well balanced, at least sort of well spread out team. On the surface, if you look at the types, it does look like he has a severe fighting weakness. But when you realize that one of them is Smeargle and one of them is Ditto, it doesn't look quite so bad. Uh,
Mhm.
and another one being Rhyperior, which is a Terra Captain, he doesn't look too horrible into the fighting matchup, and a lot. I don't want to say a lot, but there's. I feel like when you think of fighting Pokemon, you're often thinking about physical Pokemon, and Moltres is pretty nice into a physical fighting Pokemon.
Okay, let's move on to
Yeah, I think
Dan's team,
that's
Sheldon
Harry's team.
Snorlax.
Dan, let's have a look. Another. Now, what would. It is a bit of a top heavy one here. I don't think it's quite as top heavy as Tom S is because he's drafted no one pointers, which is also always interesting to see. He's got two out of the four. I don't know what are these ones called. The
Uh,
mythical. I don't know what.
Relic of Legends.
Something
I
like that.
can't remember.
Two out of them, which are scary Pokemon.
Legends of Ruin,
He's
I
got
believe.
okay. Dracovish, seen that before. Always something to worry about. And then it's a sort of a mixed bag for the rest of his team. I mean, it is it's going to be interesting to see how he plays. To be honest, I think um, his
These
top
first four Pokemon, you don't want to take a hit from any of them.
no, and while they're all strong, I do think that the top three, Chien, Pao, Chiyu, and Dracovish, they're a little bit one dimensional. You know what they're gonna do.
Oh,
So it's
definitely.
really up to the rest of his draft. Meowscarada is very adaptable to sort of add the sort of, I guess, tricksy element to his play. I looking at his draft overall, it's another offensive draft. I think is this the third? This is the third in the list of teams which have three Pokemon above 120. That being Chien-Pao, Manectric Mega, and Meowscarada, all hitting above 120 base speed.
Mhm.
And I think it is going to be another very offensive team. Like he has Snorlax, that's very tanky, especially with Terra. Bastiodon can act as sort of a wall. We'll come back to that one later. But the rest of his draft, especially where all his points is, are very killy Pokemon. So he's, I think we've seen before with Tom S. Is going to be a win fast, lose fast sort of situation with this team. Perhaps we'll see how it plays out. There's always the chance that it won't be like that. But it's definitely another offensive team.
Okay, Chien Pao.
Yeah, we'll start with Chien Pao. Now, who had
It does
Chien
its
Pao
job
last
well.
time? It was Tom A, right?
Yes, but
And
he ran some wacky sets on
I don't
Chien-Pao.
want to say Tom used it badly. I think I know in my head how good Chien Pao is in general, but what I've seen me, leads me to believe it's not as good as it could be. But I mean, if you look at stats, 135 speed is
Hmm.
fantastic. 120 attack is good. I mean, it's obviously not bad. 120 attack
With
is
Swords
very
of
solid.
Ruin,
Swords
it
of Ruin,
reduces
yeah, makes
the
it
opponent's
so
defense. So
its attack
120 is quite deceptive.
is sort of like, I don't even know how you do the maths there, but it's like it's especially effective against walls where their physical defense would be lowered even more because it's like a fractional lower, right?
And then it's got Stab Ice, which is one of the most,
Yeah,
well, one
stab
of the best
ice,
defensive types in the game.
stab dark. I think it's got all right coverage. I mean, it has sacred sword, which is always a great move to have.
Two priority moves in Ice Shard and Sucker Punch.
Correct. It was while Dark and Eye is not a great defensive type, it could be worse defensively. Like, it, I'm not saying it's good, but it can survive like maybe a return sucker punch or something like that, which is always something valuable to have, especially being Dark type itself. I don't know what much there else is to say about Chien-Pao. It does what it does
It's
well
gonna
for a
hit hard,
reason. Yeah.
and you're not gonna want to take its hits, but you've got to have an answer for it in every team. But I believe that is something that we will constantly be saying on Dan's team,
Yeah.
starting with his brother, Chiyu.
Yeah,
Chien
what
Pao's brother, not Dan's.
one thing I do want to mention as we go through is Dan's team. It lacks a bit of pivoting. Like he has, U-turn on Meowscarada is great. Zartu can pivot in a variety of ways, and Galvantria and Manectric both have Volt Switch. But to get out his faster Pokemon, Chien, Pao, Chi-Yu, and Dracovish, and his other ones, he's gonna have to hard switch quite a lot, I think.
Mm.
And with a lack of really bulky Pokemon outside of the ones I mentioned prior, that could be a bit of a detriment. We'll have to see. I mean, obviously, if you just Swords Dance turn one on Chien Pao and sweep the enemy team, it doesn't matter. So you have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But like, we'll have to see how Dan ends up playing his team.
I think the lead is incredibly important on every match versus Dan.
Mm-hmm. I think we'll come back to that a bit more as we get to the other Pokemon. But yeah, Chi-Yu, another probably, I don't want to say it, but maybe the hardest hitting Pokemon out there, or at least available in our draft.
One of them with the Specs Overheat, it can do insane
Yeah.
damage even to resist.
135 base special attack is great with Beads of Ruin lowering their special defense, and like stab specs over. You can just press that into anything, and it's gonna do a big chunk of damage. It's gonna force yourself out probably, of course, because it's overheat and it's gonna lower your special attack. But I mean, a Pokemon for a Switch, I'd take that trade most days, and I
That's a
think
good
most
deal.
people would. Damn good deal, as you might say. And I mentioned Chiyu's ever so slight bulk there. Chien Powers even. Chiyu has better bulk. It has worse HP, but a very respectable 120 special defense. So it can take some special hits. It can switch into them if it's a resisted hit or maybe even a neutral sort of weaker hit against something that outspeeds with its arguably somewhat mediocre 100 base speed for an offensive Pokemon. But
I mean, I think that's showing how fast this draft is, saying that 100 speed is mediocre.
yes,
That
I
is
think you're right.
traditionally a speed tier that you want to hit to be considered a fast Pokemon, and yet it might not be enough in this draft.
Yeah. And with how much damage it does, you can always just run Scarf on Chi-Yu and it's going to outspeed pretty much
It does
anything.
have a pretty bad lack of coverage, unfortunately, but when you hit hard with fire, as long as someone's not got a fire immunity, you're probably just spamming fire each turn.
Yeah, Fire and Dark are great offensive types, so its lack of coverage is alleviated by that, and even thanks to these ruined Pokemon that resist its stab attacks, can take big chunks of damage from it.
Okay, can I actually say we skip to Meowscarada next
Sure.
over
What do you want to
Dracovish
say?
first?
What do you want to say about Meowscarada?
Well, I wanted to point out that of the three of his four really offensive Pokemon,
Mm-hmm.
three of them are dark types. So there is a
That's
common
true.
weakness
That's
there,
true.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Especially with fighting types having some of the best priority moves. Well, most distributed priority moves, I should say.
Yeah, that's very true. Meowscarada, it suffers from that. Its defense is not great, but with Protean, it doesn't have to be Grass Dark. It can be, well, I guess whatever type you want it to be within reason. You want to press a usable move, you know, most of the time, but it can shed those weaknesses. I mean, I remember this was a Pokemon that was on my team last draft league. I remember you running stuff like Toxic Spikes. You can turn its bug weakness into, I think, a bug resist
Mhm. But
quite handily.
Protein has been nerfed this generation so that it
That's true.
only switches your type on the first move used.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
it's
I
a
don't.
lot easier to work around.
It is easier to work around. I don't think it's a huge nerf though. Being able to switch your type once per switch in is already pretty good. I mean, how many times do you really need to change your type before you're just switching out anyway? With its 123 base speed U-turn, which is always something nice to have.
And the other thing I wanted to say was if even if you manage to get a defensive wall up somehow in front of this team, its signature move Flower Trick
Mm.
always crits.
Yep.
So it can break through anything that's got a good defensive boost.
Yep. Defensive boosts don't mean too much against it. It has a good utility moveset as well, and you get both spikes and toxic spikes, which is very nice to have. Knockoff and trick for item removal, and I believe it gets taunt as well. 123 base speed taunt is very nice to have. So Meowscarada, a pretty adaptable Pokemon. That's a nice Pokemon to have on your team.
Mhm. Okay, and now we can go to the fish.
Yeah, Dracovish, not a lot to say here.
Let me predict the move set for each week. It's going to be a Fish's Rend, and none of the other moves matter.
You say that. I mean, we know what Dracovish is going to be running. It's going to be running Choice Scarf, maybe Choice Band if Dan is feeling a bit frisky and wants to sort of take advantage of some forced switches, perhaps. Or saying that we have a Sticky Webs user on his team as well. But yeah, the power that Dracovish has with its strong jaw boosted Fisher's Rend is ridiculous. Its coverage moves, it has like Psychic Fangs and Crunch, which are both boosted by Strong Jaw, so they could be worse, but it does only have 90 attack, and them not being stab moves means it is a bit inhibited, especially if it's running Choice Scarf, if it wants to start pressing coverage moves. Now,
This
apart
this
from
Pokemon is one of the reasons I said Water Absorb is so valuable earlier. I
yes,
think it's one of those Pokemon. Actually, almost all of Dan's first three Pokemon are Pokemon you have to consider in team building and will have an effect on how your team is structured, just on an individual basis, not even regarding synergy.
very much yes. He's had Dracovish before as well, alongside Darmanitan, I think.
Hmm.
Which similar Pokemon, one you have to always consider because of just the sheer amount of power that it can put out at a high speed. And one thing that Dracovish has going for it, Water Dragon and reasonably bulky base stats means you have to dedicate some to actually kill it back.
Hmm.
Now it's not going to be healing, so it's a bit weak to like incremental damage from hazards and such because it's unlikely to be using boots, to be honest. But it's hard to kill in one hit for the most part,
Yeah,
which is
the
something that has going for it.
notably, as we've mentioned, the high speed tiers in this draft may make Fisher's Rend a bit worse because
Mm-hmm.
if it's outsped, it is not doing anywhere near as much damage.
Yeah, base 75 speed means that even with a scarf, there is a possibility that the opposing Pokemon is going to be faster just out of its nature.
And going the opposite of fast, let's move over to
Snorlax,
Snorlax.
yeah. Snorlax, I think, is going to provide a much needed defensive presence in Dan's team. We already know that Snorlax, I think, probably, I don't think I'd be wrong to say Dan's favorite Pokemon.
Yeah.
Fantastic HP stat of 160, along with good special defense, means it can take a lot of hits. 110 base attack means it's not too passive either as well. It can, I think, body slam is a popular move to try and spread
Red Pirelli.
paralysis.
You've got curse sets, which can mean it's a setup thread in itself.
Yeah, curse especially sort of alleviating its lack of defense somewhat. If you can get one curse off, then it's already at a point where it can take those physical hits quite well as well.
And then you've got immunity to make it immune to toxic, so it can't be defeated by other walls.
Very
or
true.
even thick fat, which is something that not everyone considers when they're thinking of the resists on someone's team.
Thick fat, especially useful with his Terra types, specifically steel, making it
Notably, with
neutral
Terras,
to fire.
he's still picked types that are all weak to fighting, which is a little interesting.
It's an interesting decision, but he has Xatu, quad resist fighting. It's not the best switch in because Xatu itself reasonably frail, but well, we'll have to see basically what happens there. There are definitely some fighting threats to watch out for, I think, in this draft. I mean, I can already see one on my screen. Zamazenta is just below it, but we'll have to see what Dan's strategy is there. Dan, obviously, he still has his 2 trades left, so we could see maybe a week 2 trade if he feels like it. But yeah, Snorlax should provide some well-needed defense. Another problem, well, one of the problems it has is rest is its only real recovery move. So it can get worn down somewhat if it's either not using rest, which it probably will be, and then it obviously has to take turns off if it wants to get its HP back, or run a Chesto Berry.
Back when I did a monotype tournament once, I did a rest, curse, sleep talk, and then just body press, body slam, sorry, set, and it actually managed to wall someone's team out once the defense stat got high enough. So it's not the worst thing in the world only having rest.
That's true. I mean, it's been so long that since I've seen a sleep talk set, I almost forgot that move existed, to be honest. But yeah, if those are all the moves that you need, if the opponent's not running any ghost types or anything that can really muscle past it, then yeah, it can take over games like that.
Okay.
Right.
Time for the sticky webber of the team.
Galvantula. It's an interesting, well, say interesting, perhaps not interesting Pokemon. It really, it's useful. Having sticky webs is always a boon to any team. And the second fastest sticky webber available behind Rabombi at 108 base speed is a very nice thing to have. And it can then pivot itself out with its nice little volt switch, a stab volt switch at that. And I think it's got usable 97 base special attack. But
yeah, having the compound eyes with the thunder means that you actually don't miss out too much on the accuracy with 110 base power.
Yes. Thunder and sticky webs are great things that it's capable of. However, aside from that, I don't think this Pokemon does much. I think
when
it's a
you
bad
see
pick.
it, when you see it in the team lead, like when team preview, you know what it's going to be doing.
Yes.
It's most likely going to be leading the team.
Yeah, it's going to be setting sticky webs. It's going to be hitting big thunders, which is reasonably big, and it's going to be getting out of there to let the rest of its team do their work. And I think, I mean, once Dan has sticky webs up, the rest of his team is going to be able to do their work. Like GU and Dracovish are not going to really care about their bad speeds. Well, I say bad, mediocre speeds. If he can stick sticky webs, basically.
I expect we're going to be seeing the focus dash on this thing a lot.
Yeah. If necessary, I mean, 108 base speed, you might not even need to run focus sash. Like, if you think getting sticky webs down and then just dying is quite valuable because
Sometimes better than living, yeah.
mm-hmm, because you can swap in something to get the party started, as it would be.
But it also, notably, Compound Eyes with Thunder Wave means it's 100% accuracy.
That's
So
always
this
nice.
thing
Yeah,
can spread the paralysis around.
yeah, and I think Thunder itself is 30% paralysis chance, which is always
Yeah,
good as well.
so this thing will nerf a team speed tiers,
Hmm.
which is what Dan's team needs.
Yeah, it is very frail though, so don't expect it to see it living many hits.
Uh, Zatu, our
Yeah,
third Magic Bounce user of the draft.
yeah, we got almost all magic bounces in this one. I think what we're missing, Espeon.
Natu?
Well, and the pre-evolutions, Espeon and Absol Mega, and Sableye Mega.
Yeah, but
But
it just shows how valuable of an ability it is.
yeah,
Being able to deny those rocks initially
it's a
is...
fantastic ability and obviously highly valued by our players. Um, Xatu is an interesting one. 5 points is not a lot to pay for what turns out to be quite a varied utility Pokemon. We've already said Magic Bounce. It gets Defog as well itself, in case your opponent happens to. I mean, against like, for example, in like a Diancie Mega Xatu matchup, if Diancie presses Stealth Rocks because they both have Magic Bounce, then Diancie's going to get Stealth Rocks up. Not that I think that's going to be a particularly common occurrence, and in that situation, I think Diancie's probably just going to press a Rock move. But still, having Defog is always nice. It has
It's got Haze to deal with any setups.
yeah, it has Thunder Wave, as we've mentioned before, spreading status. It has Trick. It has Teleport, which is always a nice thing to have, a guaranteed slow switch.
Trick Room as well could be interesting with the Snorlax, or if he underspeeds this Draco Vish and turns that lower speed into an advantage, that could
Yep.
be a very fatal threat.
And Bastiodon, also having a very low base 30 speed. Um, However, despite all the boons it has, is its stats leave a little bit to be desired. It's not the fastest
It's
Pokemon.
not
It's not hitting
doing...
very hard, and it's not taking very many hits before it's forced to say goodbye. It's probably going to be running the boots because, well, actually, it might. I say that with its own magic bounce, you're unlikely to really get rocks up against or hazards up against Dan's team. So you can probably drop the boots and run something more, more tricky.
I don't think Zatu's ever going to be the spotlight of the team. It's never going to be the focus. It's going to be in the back, just being there. Unless it gets an insane magic bounce play, which I believe we've seen in a previous league.
Oh yeah, I think we have. Yeah, yeah. Xatu is there to make, and Galvantula. Xatu and Galvantula are both there to make sure that his top end Pokemon can do their jobs properly. And I think it in terms of that, it does its job quite well, especially for as low as 5 points.
Diodon.
All right, yeah, Bastiodon, nice little 2 point pickup.
We were speaking earlier how it's a bit weird Bastiodon's not one of the terrors. Or at
Um,
least I think so, because its main problem is its 4 times weakness.
that it certainly holds it back. I mean, it's got fantastic defensive stats. Unfortunately, its HP is a little bit low, and it has nothing in terms of attack or speed. I mean, a slow speed is useful at times, but it's mainly really going to be pressing body press to make best use of its 168 defense, which is very nice. But apart from body press, and one thing that's very nice about it is sturdy and metal burst. I think it gets counter and mirror. Oh, was it mirror coat or mirror move? Whatever the special attack version is, you can just run
Yeah,
metal burst anyway.
Magic Coat.
Magikarp, that's the one.
Oh no, that's the.
Metal
I'm
Burst is the
misleading
one
you.
you want
We
to
know what you mean.
use. Because Metal Burst covers both physical and special, I'm pretty sure. Basically make it into a stop any Pokemon in its tracks Pokemon. Unless that Pokemon happens to have multi-hit moves, but those are kind of few and far between.
I think it's definitely a silver bullet kind of Pokemon,
Yep, yep. And for only
but
2 points, that's quite valuable, I think.
it's also his only rocker on the team, is it not?
Is it? I haven't checked that yet. For specifically Stealth Rocks, yes. Meowscarada has spikes and toxic spikes, and Galvantula has webs. But for specifically Stealth Rocks, yes, Bastiodon is his only source of that. That is a good thing to mention.
Um, yeah, I've never enjoyed the sturdy on Bastodon because it seems paradoxical that it's got such high defense to take these hits, and then it tries to not get one shot. But
Yeah, I see what you
notably,
mean.
Soundproof is an ability that could be used against a Pokemon mentioned earlier, Swellow,
That's
to
true.
negate one of its min sets.
Oh,
So
Harry's gonna be in tears when
another silver bullet
Bastiodon switches
application
into
there.
his Swallow. Yeah, and I think it's useful for that, but it's not going to be doing much on its own. It's an
I
answer.
don't think it will be a common sight at all in this draft league.
I think you might not be wrong about that, but it'll always be a welcome sight. I like seeing Bastiodon on the team. All right,
Okay,
next.
on to one I actually didn't have on my radar at all, but after looking at it, I quite like.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Manectric Mega. It's yet to fit onto one of my draft teams, but I have been wanting to draft it for a while because it's one of my favorites. But only 6 points for a very nice, very fast special attacker with useful abilities both before and after megaing with was it Lightning Rod on base Manectric and then Intimidate after it becomes Mega.
Or it could run static on base Manectric for that paralysis chance.
It's true. It's true. Manectric's a really good fast special attacker. I mean, to be honest, it kind of fits well onto Dan's team. He has Chi-Yu as his other real special threat, and as we said before, 100 base speed leaves a little bit to be desired. So Manectric does fill a little bit of a niche there, and Intimidate helps alleviate the fact that he doesn't have outside of Bastiodon, which we just covered, a proper physically bulky Pokemon, because Snorlax, without being able to set up Curse, it lacks a bit of that immediate defense, but Intimidate can really help with that, and having Volt Switch, a super fast Volt Switch, Stab Volt Switch, does a bunch of damage and can really help it get that Intimidate off multiple times in a game.
Yeah, I think there's not too much else to be said. It's very on
Yeah,
what it says on the tin.
it's not too frail that it can't take any hits. The one thing it lacks is it doesn't have great coverage. It has its electric type moves, and then it gets, I think, flamethrower. It gets a bit of fire coverage, but that's about it. But electric type is not a terrible type to have as an offensive one, so it's not the worst.
I think it's other than Bastiodon, which I don't think. Oh no, sorry, my mistake. I was going to say it's one of few ground weaknesses, but Chi-Yu, of course, is right there in my face.
Yeah. And
Um,
lastly,
oh, it's one of our favorites,
I'll let you talk about Altaria.
Altaria. Well, Altaria. Every single draft, you look at it and you look at its move pool, you look at its stats, and you go, "This thing's only 2, 3, 4 points. That's a bargain." It always looks really good. We've had Mega Altaria as well,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Well,
whenever it comes out,
let's not lump Mega Altaria into the same bucket.
I feel like Mega Altaria lived the same kind of curse when it was drafted.
Okay,
And same with Swablu in our Little Cup League.
let's ignore the other Pokemon for now. Altaria itself, I think you're basically saying you're repeating what I'd say every time it comes up. I don't hate Altaria. I like the Pokemon. However, in terms of its usefulness,
It's always been underwhelming, to say the
I have
least.
referred to it as a trap before. Now I think that's a bit of an overstatement because it's hard to say anything's a trap at only 3 points. It's got it's got good utility moveset. It's got defog, which is always useful. It's got Will-O-Wisp even. It's got stuff like Haze and Roar. It's got like
This is the attraction. It looks like it can do so many things, but it
surprisingly
can't
deep.
do any of them well enough.
Nah, it's
It's a jack of all trades.
yeah, and
When
having a
you
jack of all trades at 3 points is great, but it's so hard to see a time where Dan's gonna want to run Altaria on his team above any of the rest of the Pokemon, and that might be fine. To be honest, like he's not used 3 of his points perhaps, or and who knows, we might see Altaria every week. I hope we do. Um, he's got Terra types on it that can shed its 4 times weakness, which is always nice. Like its mixed defenses are not terrible. Cloud 9 is an ability because we got 2.5
three
weather
teams with
teams.
weather, four if
Um,
you count the Vulpix.
it's true. That's very true. It's just quite passive, and
Mhm.
as we've seen from this draft, we've got a lot of very active Pokemon.
I don't
So
think it will even get a chance to set up a Dragon Dance if you're trying to go for an offensive set.
I mean, yeah, true. That's very true. But I mean, losing turns with a passive Pokemon like this, because you're gonna have to switch it in, press whatever utility move you want to press, and then get it out. Because I don't think it can pivot on its own. No,
No.
you're losing a bit of tempo there. And if what we've seen from the teams before holds, then I don't want to talk too badly about Altaria because I like it. I like him.
It has its
He's fun.
functions, but I don't see a time where one of its function isn't outclassed by one of Dan's other teammates.
Well said. I think that's very correct.
Okay.
As for the team as a whole, I think we
I think
basically covered what we want to say.
it's incredibly scary when you're looking at it because you were looking at Galvantula, four incredibly powerful threats on their own, and then either a utility Pokemon or Snorlax coming in there as a big
Hmm.
wall. I think though you kind of know what you're going to have each week. There's four of those Pokemon are locked in at least,
Yeah,
and I think you can prep for all four.
yeah.
But I don't think you'll be able to do so without some difficulty, as they cover quite a wide range of answers.
Hmm. And with those top three Pokemon just pressing their offensive moves, you're going to wear down an opposing team very fast with how much
Mhm.
damage they do.
Yeah, I think it's another team you can't misstep against, but it is just about manageable if your plan goes through.
Hmm. Next, your team,
Uh,
Ben.
Next is me. Oh, what do you think of my team?
Um, so post trades, so that's switching Skeledirge for Clefable and Statland for Hitmonchan. Um, it's an interesting team. I mean, we've got some good speed spread like Dragapult, very very fast,
I think
142
it's the
base
second
speed.
fastest Pokemon in the league.
Yes. Uh, and then you've got nice low end with Clefable and Alomomola, both able to slow switch and both very bulky. Um,
The core between Dragapult, Iron Valiant, Heatran is also it's quite good on offensive and defensive pressure, but I've gone for quite a balanced team. I want to wear you down, and then I want to hit you with the Dragapult or Iron Valiant at the end.
hmm. Yeah, it does seem it's a valid tactic. I mean,
Uh,
in terms
uh,
of, let's just have a quick look at the typings. A little bit weak to Fairy. However, a 4 times resist on Heatran means that I don't think you're too worried about that. I mean,
No, I
Could be a
think I can
little
deal
bit
with.
of worry from the Mayor, considering that has Earth power as well. But we'll have to see, obviously. But otherwise, I think that the type spread's pretty good on this team.
Mhm.
And you go.
Um, yeah, I should be able to answer quite a lot of different strategies too. Clefable has Unaware and Magic Guard, which can shut down certain strategies.
Mhm.
We've got the Flash Fire on Heat Ran for
Mhm.
the strong fire moves that are going to get me thrown around, and the Dry Skin on the Heliolisk. So a lot of adaptability in the immunities on the team.
Yeah, I mean, Gliscor with Poison Heal doesn't care about poison either.
And a mix of Gliscor, Alomomola, and Clefable make them very annoying to kill, at least.
Mhm. One thing, I mean, we're going to want to go through the Pokemon individually. One thing I do think we might be seeing the top half Pokemon more than the rest. I feel like running Hitmonchan or Regice is going to be perhaps maybe a rare sight, and the Heliolisk more of a counter pick than anything.
Oh, definitely, but I believe those, when they needed, can perform their roles quite well.
Yeah, I mean, let's have a look at the Pokemon. I mean, Dragapult. I've in the past said my piece about Dragapult several times. Um,
I love Dragapult.
I
It's
think
such a versatile pick.
I think my view of it is perhaps tainted by its poor performance in previous of our leagues. But I mean, on paper, its stats look very nice. It's
So
it's
it's always going to outspeed,
mhm,
and it can hit on the physical or special side of the spectrum with different
it
sets.
can.
And then with its massive speed stat, you can actually decrease that speed and invest a decent amount into bulk quite a bit of the time, and
Hmm.
actually run some bulkier sets, even support sets, because it runs screens.
Hmm.
It's a lot more versatile than it looks,
Yes,
and it's one of my favorite Pokemon. Second
and
favorite Pseudo Legend.
and three usable abilities.
Yeah,
Uh,
all the abilities are relevant.
Clear Body. It's good for uh,
Sticky webs
anything like that. Yeah, Infiltrator in case you're worried about people setting up subs.
or screens.
Uh, or screens, I guess that's true. But I think we do have a few. I think we mentioned before a couple of screens from before. And Cursed Body's good on those bulkier sets, as you said, to fish for that disable, should we say?
Mhm. It is a little weaker with its coverage. We all know it likes a good physical ghost move, and with one, it becomes quite overbearing.
Does it not get Poltergeist?
No, I don't believe so.
Damn, that is a shame.
Unless they've changed it.
What does it have to use? What's it used on?
Phantom Force,
Ah, yeah,
or
unlucky.
yeah, Phantom Force is its main offensive ghost type. It can use Astonish as its other physical ghost type move,
Yeah,
which you're
I
not
don't
gonna
want
want
to
to
see
use.
that. Okay, moving on. I am Valiant. This Pokemon looks really quite scary, to be honest. Takes after Mega Gallade that it's based on. However, it has mixed attacking stats, unlike Gallade's full physical investment. A pretty great speed tier of 116. Talking about speed tiers, I think I think we're at the end of our super fast teams. You have 142 and
I've got
116 as your top end,
I've got two very fast Pokemon.
but not like the ones we've seen before with the wealth of 120 plus speed Pokemon. But back to Iron Valiant, Fairy Fighting is a great type. Quark Drive obviously always good to have with like a booster energy, and just a ridiculous amount of coverage. I think.
Yep,
Um,
it's got a massive move pool.
yeah, it can do at least offensively pretty much anything you want it to. What does it have for boosting moves? Does it get
It's got
Calm
Calm
Mind, Sword
Mind.
Stance,
It's got
and
Sword Stance.
Agility? It's pretty much anything you
You
want from it. And
you can have Iron Valiant fit into any role you want.
As long as
why
it
it's
doesn't have
there.
to take any special attacks, it's pretty solid. It's pretty set. Like, what more can you want from an
Mhm.
offensive Pokemon?
This is notably the other Pokemon that got sleep banned in the recent generation, being a fast hypnosis user, so
I
it can fill a
see.
similar role to Darkrai.
I didn't even know. I didn't notice. That's fun. But yeah,
So yeah, if you want to do those coin flip strategies, Iron Valiant's right there.
all round fantastic Pokemon. Hence the 19 points cost. Perhaps it should be
Hmm
20. Anyway,
Then we
let's not.
get into some of the more bulky Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
The I
Gliscor.
really want to wear other teams out before sending out Dragapult or Iron Valiant if possible.
Yeah, I mean the next four Pokemon are all very bulky.
Hmm
Uh, Gliscor itself, I mean, it's one of those Pokemon where you know what it's gonna do, but what it does what it does what it does so well that
hmm
it doesn't matter that you know what it's gonna do. It's
Oh,
gonna poison heal. It's gonna be tanky. It's like really good at taking physical hits. Two immunities from flying and ground is very nice. Well, from its flying and ground types, I should say.
yeah.
Uh, can hit back with a reasonable power. Stab, earthquake. It's got toxic itself.
It's got setup moves. It's got spikes. It's got stealth
Yeah,
rocks.
it's one of your
Gliscor's
two hazard control Pokemon alongside Hitmonchan's Rapid Spin,
Defog is a valuable part of Gliscor.
and it can pivot out with U-turn. It's only limited by
Ice.
its quad weakness to ice and the fact that it has four move slots. It would
Yeah,
be
it's
fantastic if
a
available.
victim of four move slot syndrome for
Hmm.
definite. But our next Pokemon isn't Heatran.
What do you want to say about Heatran?
What do you want to say about Heatran?
I don't want to talk about Heatran.
Heatran can bring utility. It can run a nice bulky set, or it can be used specially as special attack stat to hit really hard. The Flash Fire immunity is really nice to be taking those fire type moves that are going to be blasted out by maybe a later team, or just the Chi-Yu.
Yeah, I mean, alongside Flash Fire against teams that don't have fire type attackers, you can run Flame Body. Um, Goes well with Dragapult's Curse Body or just taking on opposing physical attackers. And you can even run like, if we're talking about contact abilities, Alomomola commonly runs Rocky Helmet, so this could be a tricky team to press contact moves into with all these abilities.
And it's typing. It's got a four times ground weakness, but other than that,
Yeah,
it's not too bad defensively.
no,
It's weak to ground and water, and then
I'm fighting.
and fighting, and then it's immune to quite a lot after.
Yes,
Not
it's
immune, but
well, it resists a lot,
four times weaknesses.
and
Resistances
it can
it's
have
got. It's got
up to two
immunities.
immunities. But it's got great all-round stats. Apart from, I mean, it's not the fastest Pokemon, but it doesn't often need to be. It can cover either offensive or defensive needs. I mean, I've had trouble with Heatran every time it's come up and it's been used in a draft league. It's always a Pokemon that I'm uh, having to work around when building teams against it.
And it can have a nice little balloon to hold it off the ground.
Yeah, commonly seen with the air balloon to mitigate its four times weakness to those ground moves. But I mean, you've got Pokemon that can deal with that, so
Mhm,
I don't think you were too worried about those ground moves. And a good utility move set to top it off, taunt,
mhm.
stuff like that. Next,
Clefable.
Clefable. What do you want to say about Clefable?
Clefable. Well, I love Unaware. It is probably my
Yes.
favorite ability to have on a team. Just like Ditto, it shuts down a setup sweeper, and it can be super frustrating to break through.
Mm-hmm.
Clefable has so many other valuable assets though that make it really fit well into this team. Um, just the multitude of sets it can run, the utility it brings, and its fairy typing really helps defensively with some pivots.
Yeah, fairy's a great type to have. Despite what you might see from its stats, like surprisingly bulky, on top of what you said, unaware. Against teams that you don't need to care about unaware, Magic Guard is a fantastic ability. Means it doesn't have to worry about hazards or getting poisoned or anything like that. It's a good sort of multi-use Pokemon. It can fucking sweep, as I
And
think you mentioned. It's
yeah, if you get that either a Calm Mind set or a Cosmic Power set with that unaware,
mhm.
so your opponents can't set up against it, it can be incredibly hard to break alongside a stored power.
Yep.
It's got that teleport to allow me to switch into some of my other
Yeah, it's
threats
got
quite safely.
fantastic utility moves. It's got Wish Pass. It has Stealth Rock itself.
Clefable
Knockoff
is a
and Thunder
Pokemon,
Wave.
it just seems to get better and better the more you look into it.
Hmm. Yeah, I can't remember who had Clefable before, but it's definitely a Pokemon that's
Tom used it, and it was one of the
annoying.
Pokemon where him deciding to run massively different sets each week was a massive boon instead of
Which
a
Tom?
weakness. Tom Andrew Arthur.
Tom A. Okay. All right, let's keep moving. Alomomola, a Pokemon that I am quite familiar with, having used it extensively last draft league.
A Pokemon that's notably rose through the generations since it was released,
Ah, yeah, I think
breaking into OU this time in Gen 9.
didn't it was I think the addition of Flip Turn in this gen really sort of solidified its position. Um, I mean, looking at it, 165 base HP is enormous, and couple that with Wish makes it arguably one of the best, if not the best, Wish passes
You are going to be
around.
almost full healing your teammates every time you swap.
Yeah. Um, Regenerator on top of all that means like Regenerator coupled with with HP being the main part of your bulkiness is fantastic. It doesn't really need to run stuff like boots. It can take that chip damage. It can rely on Regenerator to heal it up quite a lot of the time.
It can run
It's
Assault Vest sets to mitigate its special defense
it
weakness.
can, yeah, it can. It's a fantastic Pokemon for getting in your heavy hitters safely, and I used it a huge amount for that last league. It is not
And
without its flaws, though. I mean, 75 as its best attacking stat as attack, and 80 defense is fine with its HP, but only 45 special defense is not great. So it ends up being really quite passive. It can fish for skull burns, especially against physical opponents. And does it get? No, it doesn't get toxic or anything like that. So it is very passive, and it can get worn down very quickly by special attackers. But for what you want it to do, I don't
it
think
is
you're
an
finding a
enabler.
better Pokemon than Alomomola.
Yeah, it just enables
Yep,
so many Pokemon to really get to their full potential.
I agree.
Expect after you've worn down a Heatran to low HP and it just heals back to full off of one wish, it
Yep.
can be demoralizing.
Uh, Heliolisk.
I love Heliolisk. It
Hmm.
is it's I think a Pokemon I've considered in every single draft league.
Have you drafted it before? I can't remember or not.
I drafted it in a mono type league, but that
Okay, yeah,
wasn't with
that wasn't that one.
us. Just having that high speed volt switch is always useful, especially when it hits quite hard. And then having the dry skin ability can mean
Hmm.
that water immunity saves you on quite a few occasions. Its coverage is a little limited.
Yeah, it's a niche sort of. I don't want to just pigeonhole it as an answer Pokemon too much, but it's certainly a niche Pokemon that can really shine in certain situations. As you say, taking those water hits with dry skin, or perhaps against a Sun team running solar power to boost its special attack. Although whether we see that or not is up for debate. But it's got a nice little set of stats going for itself. It's not slow by any means, and it's got decent base special attack. It's one of those sort of
Those volt switches are gonna hurt when they come along. But I think it is relatively one-dimensional.
I think that's fair. Yeah. In terms of
It just does its one dimension decently.
Yeah, apart from what you'd expect for an electric type Pokemon with the ability to spread paralysis and its pivoting ability, it gets U-turn on top of Volt Switch, so it can't be pivot blocked by ground types if you're worried about that. But other than that, I think you're right. Yeah, it does one or two things, but it does them reasonably well.
Now, if we want to talk about the really niche Pokemon, let's go to Regice.
Deja Vu, now, another Pokemon from my team last league, and another one that has shot up in my expectations massively.
I think Regice is valued more by you than me at this point, and I've got it on my team.
I think that's very valid. For 3 points, it's hard to say much bad about a Pokemon like Regice for only 3 points. Now, obviously, it has its flaws. Ice type, as a defensive Pokemon, Ice type sucks. It has 1 resist, which is Ice itself.
Ice.
And several weaknesses. However, Regice's base stats are just very nice. Like 200 special defense on top of its usable, I mean, it's better than usable, pretty fine HP of 80, and definitely usable 100 defense. Means you can run it as a ridiculously tanky special wall, or put its points into defense if you want, if you're looking for some sort of niche physical wall that has like mixed defenses, basically. Clear body's nice, so you can't fall foul of getting your defenses lowered. And 100 special attack means it's not quite as passive as it would initially seem. Like a stab Ice Beam is great, because while Ice is a terrible defensive type, it's a pretty nice offensive type. So that hits quite hard. It gets stuff like Thunder and Thunderbolt. And I think Focus Blast as well. It has like sort of decent coverage. It lacks reliable recovery, which sucks a little bit for it. I ran Rest Chesto Berry sets quite a lot on my Regice last time, I think. But that being said, the other Pokemon on my team last time, Alomomola, being able to Wish Pass to stuff like Regice is invaluable. It completely negates the fact, well, almost completely negates the fact that it has no reliable recovery outside of Rest. And Rest isn't even that bad. You can remove Toxic, you can remove Burn and Paralysis and stuff like that. It's a nice move.
I'm not sure how often it's going to be bought, but I believe when it is bought, it is going to be effective.
It's true. I think one of the reasons why I valued Regice so highly was that I had it as a Terra Captain last time, with Water and Fairy, I believe. And Terra Water Regice really just turns so much about the Pokemon around. Water being just worlds better of a defensive type than Ice means it can really serve its purpose a lot better and just wall so many Pokemon and start chipping away at the enemy team with its own attacks.
Well, it might gain Terra, seeming as the next Pokemon is getting traded away, and that was one of my initial Terra captains. But should we talk about what it's getting traded away into? Hitmonchan?
Yeah, not a Pokemon that I had really considered before. Sorry. Got something in
Well,
my throat.
it's probably the worst of the Chans, Hitmons. Sorry.
Yeah.
So you tend to not consider it with the other two being around.
However, being only 3 points compared to, I think, the other two were 6 and 7 points for Top
Mhm.
and Lee, respectively. I could be wrong about that. It doesn't really matter. It's very affordable.
And it brings quite a lot of what my team feels like it's lacking. It's got rapid spin,
Yeah. A
which
second
is
hazard control is very nice to have.
very nice. It's surprisingly specially bulky.
S-
110 special defense.
Surprisingly, yeah, perhaps 110 special defenses is definitely nice. However, a little bit held back by a base 50 HP. Although
But then
that's
it can get some nice utility moves. Like it's got the knockoff, which is an ever-present threat.
hmm
Uh, you basically never want any of your Pokemon to get knocked off.
yeah.
There are the Megas this generation
This
to help.
generation, this league,
Well, this league to help block that,
yeah.
but you can't
Even
always
then,
swap your Mega in.
knockoff is always a valuable move to have, and very few Pokemon want to take a knockoff and have their item removed.
And then it's also got some fighting stab priority moves off a
Yep,
respectable 105 attack.
definitely usable. Stab Mark Punch gets is always a nice thing to have, and
So
Iron Fist as well.
it's not going to be useful every time, no, but in the right matchups,
Yeah, I mean that's
Hitmonchan
that's what you
is
need out of a 3 point Pokemon, really, isn't it?
it's going to cause a dent. Yeah. And then Eevee is there as a team mascot. I don't plan to bring Eevee once, but who knows? Maybe we will.
Okay. Anything else? Any final remarks for your own team?
Um. Well, I feel it's a little unfair getting me to do my remarks on my own team, but
That's fair.
I
We can just move on if you want.
I feel it's quite a balanced team. If you look at its resistances and
hmm
its weaknesses, it's not got anything that jumps out. You said fairy, but I also have a quad fairy resist,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
some
Heat
of
Ram
my
covers that very nicely.
all of my walls take fairy neutrally, which
hmm
on a
hmm
wall sometimes a neutral hit is completely fine.
Yep. Sure. Let's move on to Tom B. And the first of the two really weather teams that we have. Now, certainly not a full weather investment with Tom's team. I don't think we've seen this before really where someone's drafted weather but not built their draft necessarily around that. I think I think a little bit of what Tom's done here that I can't remember who mentioned it is every single one of his Pokemon is capable of pivoting,
Hmm.
which is certainly valuable. I value pivots quite highly. Personally, I think it's great to keep up momentum like that. And having every single one of your Pokemon to be able to do that is adds a lot of flexibility to your draft. Um,
Yeah, the the rain synergy is there on the Pokemon other than what you would typically expect as well. Like Caesar's trading its 4 times weakness
yep,
for a 2 times and a
yep,
water weakness instead. And Iron Bundle isn't typically a rain Pokemon, but the water moves it hits out are going to be so much stronger.
yeah. Rain boosted Hydro Pump's going to do a ton of damage. You got Swift Swing on both Floatzel and Quillfish, which is always nice.
I also think he has maybe one of the few one pointers you could consider valuable,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's something you have to consider in team building. You will always need an answer for Sheninja, and
Yeah,
you quite often will, but it's just that one little extra bit of pressure in team building.
yeah. It's definitely nothing like the ones we've seen before, like Ditto and Spectre and stuff like that. But it's for 1 point having to really keep something in your mind is it's a valuable addition.
Yeah, I think he's done a very good job of drafting quite a balanced team where none of the Pokemon lack a threat and none of them overshadow every other Pokemon, such that you won't consider them,
Yes,
unless
this
apart
is
from Mega Caesar, maybe.
yeah, it's a nice, I think, a nicely balanced team. He's got a nice variety of speed. There's obviously no lack for pivots. He has a little bit of a rock weakness. However, one of them is Shedinja, so don't know how much you want to really count that. And he's got Terra Pelipper to cover one of the other ones of them, so not too bad there.
And one of those terrors on the Pelipper completely negates its 4 times weakness.
Yep. Going from 4 times to 0 is quite nice.
Okay,
The
should we jump
first
into Mega Caesar?
Mega Sizor is a very strong Pokemon. One I've used before. It's just, I think, what Pokemon did we mention before? It's just got everything you want basically.
It Yeah, it can take hits, it can deal out massive damage, especially with priority, so it doesn't even care about speed tiers.
Yeah, it's got great physically defensive stats. It's got definitely usable specially defensive stats. It's got fantastic attack, especially with technician boosted moves like Bullet Punch. Um, it, it's not the fastest. 75 base speed is not amazing, but it doesn't need to be honest. Like if you're trying to sweep, you're likely going to be using the Bullet Punch, which is priority anyway. So you're not worried too much about that. It gets obviously it pivots. It has Roost to heal itself back up. It has Defog, hazard control if you want to run it as a more utility set. It's got pretty much anything that you really want out of a Pokemon. Great
It makes you
typing.
feel like you have to run a fire type move, which looking at the rest
Yep.
of Tom's team is not really along here.
I agree. Yeah, it's a great fit into this team. I think, um, if he's gonna have rain up especially.
And yeah, let's go talking about Sizzle's best friend,
Talking about rain,
Pelipper.
yeah, Pelipper, the premier. I set a rain setter probably. Um,
When I look at this team, my eyes just jump straight to Pelipper, and this is the glue that holds Tom's team together.
yeah, it's certainly it mold having any sort of weather setter on your team can really help you mold the rest of your team around it. And Pelipper, it's got obviously Drizzle, but a great little sort of package of utility moves. Um, Obviously, I'm pretty sure, yeah, Defog. I think it even gets knockoff, pivot with U-turn, which is great for a weather setter. Can be run bulky. Like its stats don't look amazing, but it doesn't really need offensive investment, so you can put them into its HP and make it sort of reasonably physically defensive. It's stab like
Perfect accuracy, Hurricane.
yeah, stab hurricane and like either weather ball or surf. Um, Also, they do a good amount of damage, especially in rain. So
It also has access to Scold, which can stop a physical attacker, and it's just
yeah,
its tracks.
further boosts its physically defensive abilities. And as we mentioned before, those terrors help it shed its weaknesses.
Um, all right. Well,
Lando
I
T.
hope he never forgets to bring Drizzle, because then the whole team will fall apart.
That's true. I think that has happened before. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was a tragic game.
Moving on. Lando T. Another
The glue,
sort of
the go.
ubiquitous Pokemon. It's seen a lot, uh, and for good reason. It's very it's very usable, I guess, is what you'd say. It's
It
flexible.
can do a bit of everything, but unlike Altaria, it can do those things well.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, with I mean, I a decent typing. Uh, not nothing too bad about it, apart from ice. I mean, we've mentioned these 4 times ice weaknesses pop up every now and again. It's something you have to deal with, but great ability and intimidate, especially the fact that he's going to be pivoting his team around all the time to get multiple uses of these intimidates off. Good bulky stat spread with a fantastic 145 base attack. Um, yeah, I mean, like, what more could you want it to do? It's got hazard control. It's got rocks itself. It can knock off. It can hit you with the stab earthquake or a big old stone edge. I think it gets maybe.
I've even seen people run special Landorus.
Yeah, it's got respectable special attack. It's got taunt. Means it's a fantastic lead as well. Um, and while it's not the fastest Pokemon, a 91 speed taunt is faster than a lot of rockers out there. So
Mhm.
not too much else to say there, I think.
No, I think everyone knows how good Landorus Styrian is.
Yeah.
Now, one that I'm not actually familiar with is the next one.
Yeah, Petulant.
Percheron?
So obscure that we don't even have a proper image for it, but
I've heard that it's very good and
yeah.
that it is tearing up OU in the current
I
generation.
think it was originally, I think it has rose through the ranks. I haven't paid a huge amount of attention, but I remember seeing it much lower when it first came out.
Well, it
Uh,
has a signature move that
Malignant Chain,
toxics
indeed.
the opponent a 50% chance of 100 power.
100 base power, 50% chance to toxic, and on top of that, it has its unique ability that confuses an opposing Pokemon whenever they get poisoned by it. That on top of a strange strat spread of 88 in all of its stats, apart from a very nice 160 defense, means it's a very unique Pokemon. It's great as a physical wall. It can really disrupt enemy Pokemon with its aforementioned poison confusion combo. And it gets on top of the defensive role it can play. It also gets nasty plot, so it can force its way as a wall breaker in certain situations, which is always a useful thing to have. And
Something that can catch strong physical attackers off guard as well. It's got foul play.
mm-hmm. Its pivoting move of choice is parting shot as well, which is a very nice one to have for a team.
Or Memento, I'm
I
going to
mean,
say there
Memento,
as a bit
true.
of a
It can
stretch.
it can defog block, I guess, with Memento perhaps, or
Well,
get the
yeah.
2 times drops for an even more guaranteed setup if Tom wants to switch in size Omega and press Swords Dance or something like that for free. But yeah,
So
it suffers a bit from sort of lack of coverage. Um, it has no coverage outside of its stab types, that being Poison Ghost, and it has a couple of utility moves. It has reliable recovery, which is nice. I mentioned the parting shot. It has toxic, and Destiny Bond is always nice to have sometimes. But outside of that, it is a bit well, 2 dimensional, I guess. It has its role as a defensive Pokemon. It has a role as a wall breaker, but you know what it's going to run in either of those roles, I think is what I'm trying to say.
but no Pokemon fully walls it yet. So it can always hit something until Game Freak decide to release their normal steel type.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, Belly Bolt.
Belly Bolt, probably. We talked about some good value picks earlier, but definitely certified bargain here for 5 points. Belly Bolt has gone up in a lot of people's expectations, I think, perhaps, but really good as a sort of mixed, sort of bulky Pokemon that can. I mean, I keep repeating myself. It's a pivot. It's every Pokemon on Tom's team is, with its nice stab volt switch. Static is a great ability to have for those contact moves. It also has Electromorphosis, its special ability that gives it the charge effect when it takes a hit, which we might
It can
see some
just
use of.
come in and take those hits so well.
Yes, it's really quite bulky. It gets reliable
Slack.
recovery. Yeah, from slack off. Has like thunderwave, double screens. Even I think see people mention it has soak, which is interesting. A tech move to use against like an opposing ground type Pokemon. As for weaknesses, it has no coverage basically. Similar
Yeah.
to Petrant, but for
Although
5 points.
the chilling water does cover the ground immunity quite well, especially in a rain.
Chilling water. I mean, you're better off probably just using soak, and then using a stab
Maybe.
electric type move. Um, yeah, yeah. For 5 points, I think that's a hell of a pickup.
Mhm.
And getting perfectly accurate thunder is always nice as well. All right,
Okay.
Floatzel, the first of the really proper rain users. Um, Usable, like respectable 105 base attack and a good speed stat of 115 on top of Swift Swim means you can just take what's it called, Choice Band, and it gets Wave Crash now, which is a nice newer water type move, and it's really gonna muscle past a lot of Pokemon with its rain boosted water type stab water type moves, and with Terra Water, it's gonna do just a ton of damage.
Or it has that other option of Terra Ice, as we said earlier, such an offensive type, with
Yeah,
the Ice
great
Spinner on
defensive
top.
type. Yep, Ice Spin, that's another new move. Um, I think, what does it get for set? I think it's Bulk Up. I think in case a choice band set would be too limiting. Obviously, you have to take a few turns, but that can definitely be usable. Um, I mean, compared to your other Swift swimmers, like, I don't know, Mega, whatchamacallit, Swampert,
Swampert, yeah.
you're spending a lot less points for a Pokemon that can do sort of a similar job.
It
Like
just doesn't quite hit as hard.
it's not going to hit quite as hard. It's not quite going to have. You're probably going to have to use a choice band, so you can't switch between the moves, maybe. But it does a great job for quite cheap. So
Also, having that speed already at 115 means
mhm.
you don't have to invest too much. So
Yeah,
you can
and
invest in some of its bulk.
it's usable outside of rain, which a couple of Swiss swimmers um, lack, or like weather boosted Pokemon.
It also opens up the opportunity that if it's already going to outspeed things with 115 speed, it can run that water veil to stop it getting burnt
It's true. It's
and
true.
keep its physical attack stat high.
Hmm. Yeah. Next on the list, Iron Bundle. Talking about fast water type Pokemon. Uh, this Pokemon used by Tom, the same Tom, last time. He obviously liked it so much he's picked it again. Incredibly fast, 136 base speed. Great, 124 base special attack. Surprising physical bulk with its 114th events and Quark Drive. And it gets Freeze Dry.
Yeah,
So,
its coverage doesn't look great until you realize Freeze Dry
yeah.
and Hydro Pump together just hit so much.
There's very few things which can resist both Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry. So like its lack of coverage is very much alleviated by that. It's one of its few weaknesses is the fact that it doesn't get like Surf. So it's sort of only choice for water move is Hydro Pump, which is only 80% accurate. So it's somewhat inconsistent in that way, but for what you're getting, it's well worth it.
I
Quark Drive is
expect
a fantastic ability.
we're gonna be seeing Iron Bundle come in, take the booster energy on the speed, and then just sweep up a weakened team towards the end of matches.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and as long as it doesn't have to take any of those special hits, it should be able to do really quite well.
Okay, Zarude.
Yeah, not much to say about Iron Bundle. Zarude, an interesting one. We didn't see a huge amount of use of it last time from Harry's team, but opinions these days, Zarude, fantastic Terror Captain. And as we see, Tom has chosen it as one of his. Probably another bargain, to be honest. Honestly, great base stats. Like, nothing is particularly exemplary about its base stats. It's got good attack, but having such a good spread of stats on top of terastallizing means it can really make use of its bulk and set up to sweep an opponent's team. It has swords dance, bulk up, trailblaze, so it can it can boost basically any of its stats apart from special defense.
That stab knockoff is something that no one's gonna want to switch
Stab
into.
knockoff is great. Stab power whip, stab any of those three terror types fighting a poison. I mean, the Terra Dark knockoff is going to do a huge amount of damage. It has the bulk to set up in someone's face, basically.
And then the synthesis to just heal it back up.
Yeah. Get
Although
synthesis.
synthesis on a rain team is a little peculiar.
Um, eh, yeah, it does get is a unique move, jungle healing. Which is only a quarter heal, but it cures the status condition. I'm not sure if we're ever going to see that, but we'll have to see. I mean, you probably won't
The
need to
drain
press
punch
synthesis that much.
might be enough.
Yeah, it gets drain punch. It can pivot out with U-turn. I think Dimension Taunt is always good. It's good.
And a new move, Trailblaze, from this generation to give it that much needed speed boost.
Speed boost on top of a stab grass attack. So yeah, while it's not the fastest base at 105, it's certainly fast enough and only really needs one boost before it's outspeeding most things.
Okay.
Shedinja. I mean,
Shedinja.
there's
What can you say?
very little to say here.
There's very little to be said about this.
Indeed, it's Shedinja. It gets Wonder Guard. It has crap stats apart from its 90 attack. It has some alright utility moves in like Will-O-Wisp and Toxic.
It's got two priority moves as well in Sucker Punch and Shadow Sneak, so
It's true.
it's gonna do
Stab,
something.
Shadow Sneak. I think, does it get a boosting move? It gets Swords Dance. So that's really where you're looking at it from. It's like, I'm gonna try and find a position where I can switch Shedinja in, where the opponent has nothing that can hit it. They either haven't prepared well enough, or I've taken out any of the threats that could hit Shedinja. Press Swords Dance until I'm at whatever attack I want to be at, and press Shadow Sneak or Toxic or whatever, and just freely sweep the entire rest of the enemy team.
You've got to have one answer to Shedinja on your team.
Yeah, and that is the the downfall of Shedinja, is that the answers are rather varied and sort of widespread.
Bug Ghost is not an amazing typing, and there was a special rule that Shedinja could not be the Terror Captain to prevent the Air Balloon Terror Electric Shedinja set.
Yeah, that decision was made to disallow Shedinja as a Terror Captain, hence why it's 1 point, and also not a Terror Captain on Tom's team. You also have to sort of choose which item you want to run on it. It's most likely going to be boots, so it doesn't die to rocks, but leaves you weak to getting like poisoned or worn down by sandstorm or stuff like that. So
every week,
lots of
not every week. Every draft, I expect Shedinja to be the first 1 pointer gone. This draft it was Noibat, but that was the thematic one for the New Forest Noibat.
Noivern. I'm surprised he hasn't drafted Noivern yet, actually.
No, Noibat.
Right, last, but certainly not least, Quillfish. A nice little 6-pointer, which has a little bit of flexibility in itself. A repeat of Toxapex's typing with that nice little water poison.
He's
A
been
couple
selling
of
those spikes.
useful abilities in Swift, Swim, and Intimidate. So it can really either be run as a more defensive Pokemon, utilizing its, workable 85 defense, but definitely better on top of Intimidate. Or with the help of Tom's Rain, it can go for some sort of attacking set. It has fine attack at 95. I'm not sure if it can. Oh, it gets Swords Dance, and so it can boost that. A nice little liquidation or gunk shot, or its unique move Barb Barrage, which has a 50% chance of poisoning and double power, up to 120 if the target's already poisoned.
Really great after you've hit those toxic spikes out
Yes,
already.
but that is, as you brought up, the real value. Both spikes and toxic spikes on this Pokemon is very nice. On top of Taunt, an 85 speed Taunter. I mean, he's got quite a few Taunters on his team, which is always nice to have to make sure those spikes stick. And he even gets Thunder Wave for some reason.
Yeah, this guy has been used as a reliable spiker in whatever tier he falls in since Gen 2, and why can't he do that in a draft league? He's not a top tier pick, but if you need a spiker, it's a reliable one.
And only 6 points. And as for Tom's team as a whole, I think we've covered it. It's going to be interesting to see him use this in the battles. I think.
I think
No.
he's got a good amount of synergy throughout the team, but if
Yes.
Pelipper falls and the rain wears off, then that synergy goes.
I don't even think so. I think that he's drafted almost all of his Pokemon that are very usable outside of Rain.
Oh, I don't deny that they're usable. It's just it.
I
I think
mean, true. The underlying theme of Rain will fall, but I don't think that. I mean, Sarud doesn't really care about the Rain. Lando T doesn't really care about the Rain. Neither does Petra, and these Pokemon can all definitely be used by themselves.
weirdly, I think one of his team's weaknesses is the water type itself, because the rain also boosts your moves, and
Mm-hmm.
Landorus doesn't want to be taking a 4 times water attack.
Yep.
Caesar then gains the weakness. These Pokemon that sort of utilize not having that weakness fall quite a bit, and he doesn't have any water immunities, so you're going to
That's
be
true.
hitting neutrally onto everything at least.
That's true. But I think Sizor definitely prefers dropping the 4 times weakness for fire to
Mm.
take in the water moves a bit harsher. I think that's definitely a trade that I'd like to make.
Oh, definitely. I don't doubt anyone would make that trade.
Damn good trade. Right. Tom A. Uh,
You can take Tom A's
Arguably the
team.
most interesting draft of
The
of
only
the
team
only.
to not use all the points.
That's true. Yeah. Once Tom trade goes through at the start of next week, he'll have used all of his points. And I think that's the same for everyone. Yep. The first of the teams which we've covered, which actually has more than 10 Pokemon, using all the full 12 set. So that's definitely, it adds variety. It makes it a lot harder to plan around when he's got at least 2 more, sometimes 5 more Pokemon than an opponent's team could have effectively. However, the quality of the Pokemon could be said to drop slightly.
Yeah, I think that is a very much in theory. The versatility is great, but a lot of these Pokemon share a common weakness, which really it negates the advantage that brings.
Yeah, Tom is relying quite heavily on Poliwrath to take a few of these uh, fucking rock and steel type moves,
Mhm.
um, which is not the best. But he does have Terra types to make up for that. I think we'll go quite quickly through a few of these Pokemon. I mean, Wobbuffet, it does one thing. It has counter and is it? I've forgotten already. Miracote,
Yeah,
that
and
one,
Destiny Bond.
and Destiny Bond, and 190 HP, which is ridiculous. And that's it. It does that, and that's about it.
Sh- Shadow Tag isn't banned
Oh
though,
yeah, sorry, I
so
forgot to mention Shadow Tag. It traps and it presses the counter move and hopes to take a 1-for-1.
if you trap a Specs Pokemon, sometimes this can see the end of it. So I don't think you should ever underestimate Wobbuffet's potential.
That's true. I don't mean to diminish it, but it does what it does.
And there isn't too
mean,
many
with
Ghost types drafted this set that are the only ones that can switch out of Shadow Tag.
It's true. I mean, with 190 HP, I mean, it could, with a counter move, take technically maybe not 2 KOs, but do damage to 2 Pokemon perhaps if it somehow manages to get into that situation. It's a bit unlikely, but you never know. Poliwrath, it's got like
It's
fine mixed bulk. It's got water absorb, which is always nice. As other than that, it's bulky. It can I think it can use bulk up to sort of set up. What else? I mean,
it's got that Drain Punch to heal itself back
yeah,
up.
stab, drain punch.
So if it gets set up, it can become quite a nice bulky physical attacker. Although it's never going to have the speed, especially as he doesn't have a range setter to activate that Swift Swim.
True. Yeah. I mean,
Unless it's not unknown for Tom to run Rain Dance on his Pokemon.
that's
You
true.
you
That's
never
true.
know what you are getting when you face Tom. That is
It's,
one of his advantages, I'll say.
yeah. Um, I don't know what else to say about Poliwrath.
I think it's a generally well-rounded Pokemon for 6 points.
Yeah,
I think it's
I think that's
fair.
fair. And theoretically, his best slow pivot because it gets a 70 speed baton pass, and that's about all he has to work with. But I'm not sure if Tom's worried too much about slow pivoting.
Uh,
Crobat.
Going on to a fast pivot here.
Yeah, a very usable Pokemon to be honest. 130 base speed is very quick. And while the rest of its stats look kind of mediocre, it definitely has good use. It has a nice little set of utility moves. It can defog, it can pivot, a fast pivot. It gets what else does it get?
It gets some pretty good stab, especially with dual wing beat these days,
Or Brave
or the
Bird.
Brave Bird, and then it can roost that back up.
Yeah, nice reliable recovery. It's toxic because it's a poison type, obviously. And poison flying, it could be worse. 3 quad resists and an immunity is really not too bad. I mean, it can definitely best leverage its stats with that typing. And with such a high speed, you can probably invest more into its defensive stats. That's
I don't doubt we will see a Wall Crobat this league.
I look forward to it. Talking about wall,
Wall
rain,
Rain.
Rhine, wall rain. I don't know. Either way, Pokemon that I don't think we've ever expected to be seen drafted. Made arguably usable through Terra in a similar way that perhaps Regice has been, in my opinion. Perhaps not as good as Regice. It does have a respectable 110 HP and decent mixed bulk and an acceptable 95 special attack. And alongside thick fat, those steel and grass Terra types are neutral to fire. It's always very nice.
Now, what else does it do though? That is my question.
It's very sad. It doesn't get any real reliable recovery. If it had like slack off, then I think it'd be a nice little pick. But I think in
Yeah,
certain
without
scenarios
the
it can take the hits and then maybe hit back with a stab ice move. And looking here, it actually gets sword stance. So
The only issue is it's a sword stance on 80 base power, although its coverage is so much better on its physical side than its special side.
It's 80 base
So,
attack. That doesn't matter a huge amount once you've got a sword stance boost. I mean, it's got 65 base speed, so that's a bit rough. And
yeah,
no ice shard.
I don't know how Tom is going to use Warine, but I am excited to see
Same.
what
I would
methods he
agree.
comes up
And
with.
it's 2 points, so what do you
I
expect
think
from a 2 pointer?
it could run rest sets. It's got 110 HP.
Certainly.
It can maybe take a hit or two,
I
and
mean,
a
you can
sleep
always run
talk
like
set.
Chesto Berry as well.
Yeah, sleep talk sets are possible. I think he will find a niche for it that we are not seeing right here.
I think so too. I'm excited to see what Tom does with Warren. Another ice type, Mamoswine. A much higher pointed one at that. Mamoswine, pretty good wall breaker generally. Really good, nice base 130 attack. Another thick fat Pokemon, and Ice Ground is fantastic offensive type, and just having that stab ice shard with 130 base attack does a lot of damage, and obviously doesn't care about its mediocre 80 speed when it's hitting at +1 priority.
Mhm.
So it's hard to really properly switch into, and it can really sort of break apart teams a little bit, and at the end it could even clean up with its ice shard.
Speaking about switching, it can be used as a nice stealth rocker, although I don't think it's going to be the premier one we see on Tom's team, with
Yeah.
it being one of his few actually good offensive threats.
Yeah, it does get stealth rock, but yeah, as you say, I doubt we'll see it. It does a move which we probably will see though, knockoff. It's very nice to have on when it's forcing those switches. Next, the last of the Terra captains, Crossel. A pretty nice little physically defensive Pokemon. I think that is a bit of a theme we see in Tom's team here. Is he's definitely stronger on the physically defensive side than the specially defensive side. I think we'll get back to that a little bit later, perhaps. Bug Rock, definitely not the worst defensive type out there.
It does leave some things to be desired.
It doesn't have a huge amount of resists, but its weaknesses are not terrible. And well, he's got Terra Captain on it anyway, so he can definitely cover them. Sturdy prevents it from ever being taken out in one hit, so it's good for setting up hazards. And
Or it's a shell smash set can be used alongside Sturdy to get the guaranteed boosts. Although I don't know how much is outspeeding, even at
well, that's
times
what
2.
I was gonna say. Shell Smash is basically the other option. And honestly, I don't think it would run sturdy on Shell Smash. With weak armor, it can switch into a physical attack, lose a defense, but gain another +2 speed. So after a Shell Smash, it's at +4 speed, which means it's got a good chance. I mean, it's more than a good chance. It's almost certainly outspeeding almost everything at that point.
And then as long as they hit, Rock is actually an incredibly good offensive typing.
Yes.
It's just that 80% accuracy on Stone Edge has led some people
It is
straight to defeat before.
certainly frustrating. Has a similar sort of move pool to Mamoswine, so much that it has rocks and knockoff as well, but Cross will also get spikes, so a bit of variety there is quite nice. Other than that, I think we've covered what it does, though. I mean, with the Terra Rock, it could really do a lot of damage.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Terra
something that you
Ghost
can ignore.
to block those spins, although he also has Bramble Gas, so not too sure how much use that is, but we'll see.
And Terra fighting for the body press synergy, I believe.
Oh, true. Yep. Next, Tom's favourite
Speaking of
Pokemon.
Body press.
and the namesake of his team, Avalug, sort of like a Reggie Rock sort of style Pokemon. I don't know. It's got a lot of defense. It's got good
It's
HP, a lot of
physical
defense.
Clefable. Not Clefable, Blissey, sorry.
Sure. Well, I mean, Blissey
But with
has.
a much worse typing.
It's got good attack, is the thing. 117 base attack means it's a lot less passive than something like Blissey. Uh, no special defense and very low speed. I mean, the speed doesn't really matter for a Pokemon like this, but the special defense hurts a bit. I personally was very surprised to see Avalug not being one of Tom's Terra captains. Being able to, similar to Regice, shed that ice typing for something that's much better is very valuable. But we'll see,
Yes,
basically.
a steel type on Avalugg would make it such a better
Steel or
defensive
rock,
Pokemon.
or not rock,
Or
or
even
water.
Fairy might be great. That would help him with his fighting weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's got the same thing as Bastiodon with Sturdy on a Pokemon that probably isn't getting one shot anyway.
Well, you say
And then
that. It's definitely getting one shot if it gets hit by a special move.
yeah, but then its other abilities aren't too useful either.
No. But it does have useful access to Rapid Spin and
Mhm.
Recover, so it has reliable recovery, which is nice. And it can with a speed as low as that, you're almost certainly getting a boost to your Avalanche, so it can hit some good Avalanche moves. But
I think the body press is its signature move that we're
Body
gonna see
Press
used
is going to
again and
be
again.
quite prolific, I think. Yeah. Next, one of my least favorite Pokemon ever, Dramper.
Ah, Dramper's he's just a little guy.
Despite how much I hate it, actually quite a usable Pokemon, to be honest. Um, very nice 135 base special attack, and usable defenses, which help because Berserk is quite a nice ability to have. Uh, other two, Sap Sipper, Grass Immunity is
We
perhaps
don't have
not as
too many grass types in this
valuable
draft league.
as something like Water Absorb. And then Cloud9, we'll see how much use Tom gets out of that. But Berserk being able to, with Roost that it gets, activate Berserk perhaps multiple times, can either allow it to get to ridiculous levels of special attack, or perhaps even negate its drop after, say, dropping a Draco Meteor.
Hmm.
Um, and those Draco
The
Meteors are certainly going to hurt, especially if it's like spexed.
the normal stab as well on the hyper voice is never
Mm-hmm.
something to be ignored. The normal is a type that's not actually too resisted, so it's something you can spam quite easily.
Yep, it actually has quite a variety of coverage moves. Um, so it's got fire coverage, it's got fighting, it's got grass. So it can even set up with calm mind, I believe it gets. So there's it's a reasonably flexible Pokemon.
And if you really want to be brave, you could use the scale shot to try and set up a speed boost. Actually, I have
It's
just looked at its speed stat.
36 base speed, so I doubt that's going to happen.
We
Yeah, it's let down by its speed, and while its defenses are usable, they're not great. So it can definitely get KO'd rather quickly if left to its devices.
glare is something that is nice.
Oh, it gets glare. That's always, yeah, very nice to have.
100% accuracy, so you're not dreading the 10% like Thunderwave.
And well, it can affect ground type Pokemon as well.
Hmm.
Next, Dreadnought. I think it's a similar deal to Crustle here. It's a Shell Smash user. Unfortunately, unlike Crustle, I think that's about all it's gonna be able to do. It's not as good as the Rock Setter, in my opinion, as Crustle.
No.
It does get strong jaw, but it doesn't get any moves really apart from Crunch to use the strong jaw with, it's probably going to be running liquidation as its stab water move.
Yeah,
So
so the shell armor might be more worth to just ensure that you don't take those
yeah,
critical hits.
and it's a swift swim. So as we said, Tom may run rain dance.
But that four
We'll have
times
to
weakness
see.
to grass is
It's rough.
pretty horrible.
Yeah, water rock is interesting, but I mean stab rock is always nice. But we already have one of them on Tom's team, so
Maybe we'll see a Swift Swim set sometime with a rain dance user on Tom's team.
yes.
Surprisingly, a lot of his Pokemon work well with snow or rain.
Mm-hmm. So remains to be seen whether Tom uses that or not.
Uh,
Bramblegast.
mhm.
Bramblegast, quite actually, you know, 6 points, quite usable Pokemon. Um, it's a great little hazard control Pokemon because it gets Rapid Spin itself and Spikes, and it's Ghost type, so it can Spin Block. It gets Strength Sap as a nice little heat recovery move to make up for the fact that its HP is pretty dire at 55 and 70 as both of its defenses is not great. So it's not really going to want to take many moves that aren't resisted. But
It can take wind moves, so I'm not sure how many of those are actually in the draft, but it's something I'd have to look into because it's weird. Like
yeah,
bulletproof covers some moves I wouldn't expect.
I'm not sure
Wind,
entirely what wind moves, what comes under that
but I
umbrella.
feel Tom's opponents might also not know what comes under wind moves, and this might
Hmm.
be something that he can get as a prize switch in onto. Take
And
the attack rays
yep,
and hit them with a rapid spin, hit them with a shadow sneak, hit them with a power whip.
yeah, as I was
Or
saying,
it,
115 base attack is not bad, and a fine 90 base speed means that
it's got
like
the trailblaze to back up that speed as
yeah,
well.
it can boost its speed via rapid spin or trailblaze. Um, Stab poltergeist or power whip is doing a bunch of damage if they hit, so it's not passive, unlike some
No.
other Pokemon which may cover these roles. And at only 6 points, it's a pretty nice little utility Pokemon that can deal some damage itself as well.
Mhm. Well, I think we've been quite negative so far.
Have we?
So let's move on to these final two.
Okay,
Compared
well,
to other teams,
I
we've
think
been a
I
little
think we've been
down
quite
on
fair, to be
a
honest,
majority of these Pokemon.
for the draft. Gallade Mega is a great Pokemon.
Yeah,
Colossal 165 attack and good 110 speed. Not fantastic, but good um, for um, for what it is, as well as we've covered before with Iron Valiant, a fantastic move pool.
yeah,
Um,
it's very usable.
and surprising mixed defenses means it's probably not going to be taken down by a random hit. Means
I
it's
do
really good.
I do feel unfortunately it can't utilize its entire move pool because it can't take any supportive moves. This Pokemon is going to have to take on the majority of Tom's offensive pressure, forcing him to run
Yes.
a physical set each time, whether that's set up or banned or oh wait, no, he can't banned. It's
Well, he could run band base Gallade if he really
yeah,
wanted to, but he
whether
has Sword
it's an all-out
Stance
attack set
and Bulk
or
Up, and I think even gets Agility these days on newer Gallade.
yeah.
Um, it can set itself up to sweep rather handily. It doesn't need much of a boost on top of that base attack to deal a lot of damage. And Psychic Fighting is a pretty decent offensive type. Fighting is very nice to have. Um, yeah,
It also has the 110 speed taunt, which is never something that a stealth rocker wants to face.
nope. Taunt is very useful. This is second taunt user after Crobat. Um, yeah, it's definitely probably the main threat on Tom's team offensively.
Uh, yeah, I think other than setup sets or all-out attacking sets, we're not gonna see too much from Gallade, but its coverage means it's going to hit a lot of things super effectively,
For
or it's
sure.
going to use priority, or it's going to just knock off all your items.
Yeah, it's got a vast move pool for it, so it can do whatever it needs to
It's
do.
18 points for a reason.
And finally, for Tom's team, Shaman Sky. A rather typical Serene Grace user, perhaps.
Yeah, one of the best.
I probably the best, I'd say. Not that I don't say a few others. 127 base speed is very nice. It's going to outspeed most Pokemon with that, and a good base 120 attack means it's going to hit quite hard with its moves. And Serene Grace with Seed Flare means it's just nigh impossible to properly wall. 80% chance to lower your special defense by 2 stages on that
And his
Seed
other
Flare.
option on Serene Grace, the Air Slash, which will have a 60% chance to
Yeah, and
flinch.
against offensive Pokemon, that Air Slash is gonna really ruin their day. Just every time, just you're trying to attack into Shaman Sky, just rolling the dice, because chances are it's gonna move faster than you unless you've scarfed your own Pokemon.
There is a chance you never get to click a move against Tom's team if he gets lucky on the Shaman's guy, and
Yeah,
we know that Tom controls the luck in these games
we do
sometimes.
know if he flicks the switch, then it's game over. Um, I expect that's probably mostly what we're going to see out of Shaman Sky. It has some limited utility as well, but
We could see a Ikea gets Trailblaze this generation as well, actually, so
ooh,
it can go even
boosted
faster
speed.
off of an offensive move.
Yeah, and it gets Swords Dance, so we could see a physical set. And Healing Wish, in case he wants to sack it to heal that Avalug back up or something. I mean, Avalug, not Avalug, but you know. That's Tom's team. It's
Tom's team is 2 Pokemon that he's forced to bring
I
that
don't
I
think
don't
he's
know
forced
he
to bring, and I
will
don't think
bring.
Tom would ever force himself to bring anything. I think he's definitely going to have his work cut out for him, and he's going to have to fight for his victories. But there's definitely a plethora of usable Pokemon in here. Whether he's going to be able to use all of the usable ones in a 6 Pokemon team, we'll have to see.
Tom
And
Tom has definitely embraced the words of Karen from the Pokemon games, where truly skilled trainers should try to win with their favorites.
yeah, and he does have a bit of a lack of specially defensive Pokemon that he has to worry about.
Hmm.
But we'll see.
Well, I'm sure there won't be any fast special moves going around in this draft.
I mean,
Anyway,
Gallade Mega
let's
and
move on.
Shaman Sky are very usable, so we'll see. Anyway, the penultimate team. Man, this is going to be a long video. Jake. In what is, in my opinion, at least when I'm looking at it, probably the scariest team. At least, probably I struggle to sort of build against these new generation Sun teams. But yeah, a very heavy core of Sun-based Pokemon, including 3 photosynthesis users.
Mhm.
And then a sort of mixed bag of supportive Pokemon as his lower tiered picks.
I think we are very locked in on the Sun strategy here, though.
I agree, yeah. I doubt. Well, you never know. And it'd be interesting to see if he doesn't. But I doubt we're ever going to see a game where Jake isn't running some sort of drought Pokemon.
I think we won't see a game where he's not running both. Having the Sun up is so important to him that he can't risk losing one of these
I
Pokemon.
mean,
And
it's very important, especially for like Venusaur. But the photosynthesis Pokemon are really quite good in their own rights. Like they go from good Pokemon to just absurd when boosted naturally by Sun, because they can run whatever item they want on top of that and boost usually their choice of stat, at least in terms of ice, either an attacking stat or speed. But yeah, well, let's get into it. I mean, Roaring Moon is a fantastic attacker. It's really good at threatening sweeps constantly. 139 base attack is very good. 119 speed is pretty damn solid.
It's got
Dragon
that
Dark
U-turn.
is yeah, he can pivot. He's got good offensive types. Photosynthesis, great ability, especially with the rest of the sun. Dragon Dance, fantastic boosting move. Stab knockoff. He can even. It's an interesting one. He can even, when not running sun, use something like a booster energy, which will boost its acrobatics to be a great move to click as well. In sun, it's a bit trickier to get that acrobatics boost off, but we'll have to see what happens there. Even get stuff like earthquake, so it's got like good enough coverage to um, cover most threats that it's gonna come into.
This thing gets one Dragon Dance off, and you should be quivering.
Dragon Dance in Sun, it's gonna be absolutely tearing through your team for the most part. Yeah. So you said
Uh,
it's got reliable recovery and roost. It even has taunt.
mhm. It's an 18 pointer for a reason. This thing is notably it can't get photosynthesis boost on speed without not fully investing into attack. So
But it doesn't have to sacrifice a huge amount.
no,
And by virtue of being on a Sun team, it doesn't have to run booster energy, so you can boost that attack in other ways.
yeah,
Notably, Dragon
the
Dance.
band sets, Dragon Dance sets,
Yeah.
being able to run boots is going to be lovely for Roaring Moon,
Alright,
just to stop that chip.
the second photosynthesis Pokemon. I hate this
Walking
Pokemon
away.
because it is
I
very strong. Walking Wake is an incredible special wall breaker in Sun. It does ridiculous amounts of damage. Not quite as fast as Roaring Moon.
but it's not slow either.
It's not slow. 109 is real good. If Jake chooses so, he can just boost its speed with photosynthesis anyway. And in games where he doesn't need that speed boost, a photosynthesis booster special attack on top of specs means it does ridiculous levels of damage. Its unique move, Hydro Steam, a water type move that is boosted by Sun instead of
Calm.
weakened by it, which is definitely something that Pokemon needed. It's great. Draco Meteor does a ton of damage when it's boosted. There's it just does, it hits so hard. It's so hard to swap into with its coverage, and not having to run choice specs means it can switch move on the fly, so it's so hard to match. It similarly to Walking Wake, not to Roaring Moon, has decent bulk on top of that. It's hard to revenge kill it when it's not already been weakened. And Water
No,
Dragon is a good defensive type,
this
so
thing is a monster.
it's real strong.
I mean, it's got only water, flying, fire, and dragon coverage, but it doesn't need more than that.
It doesn't really, and I think the only reason it's less points than Roaring Moon is it doesn't operate quite so well outside of Sun,
No.
having to use booster energy on that. But obviously, Jake's not got to worry about that because he's got two Sunsetters on his team. And talking about those
Speaking of
Sunsetters,
sunsetters,
Charizard Mega Y, the it's tough to say whether Mega Y or Torkoal is the best Sunsetter.
I think they completely different in
Yeah,
their uses. Charizard is going to start hitting offensively off of Sun straight away.
yeah. I mean, 159 special attack boosted by Sun on those stab fire moves is gonna do huge amounts of damage.
100 speed is nothing to laugh at either, although as we've seen in this draft, we've just
Yeah,
got such
the
fast Pokemon about that it might get outsped.
Mega Y would be a top tier Pokemon were it not for the fact that 100 speed leaves something to be desired, and a guaranteed, if running the Megastone 4 times weakness to stealth rocks is a huge hindrance.
Mm.
Now Jake has a control. He has 2 rapid spinners from Torkoal and Fortress, defog on Oricario and Mega Y itself, although whether it wants to run it, who knows. But it's not perfect, and he could run into that issue with Mega Y certainly before in the future.
But this thing can get off a Dragon Dance or a Tailwind to boost its speed and just start tearing through teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it has some coverage. It has Solar Beam, obviously. Focus Blast is nice to have. Gives a little bit of flying coverage in Air Slash if you want to cover that. Bit of Dragon, but mainly it's going to be pressing Flamethrower, or perhaps Weather Ball is for the slightly higher power if you don't want to risk the accuracy of Fire Blast.
Uh,
Yeah.
do you think we'll ever see a belly drum set? Something unique?
Belly Drum on Jars. I didn't even know it had it. Who knows? I doubt it. But Jake could surprise us.
I think I'm hoping we get surprised because I don't want to face this monster alongside Walking Wake.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard team to specially wall. Next, Torkoal, the best non-mega Sunsetter. I'll give it that title. Great because not only does it have drought, it has hazards, it has rocks, and rapid spin on top of that. It's a fantastic lead, so much so that I think most opponents are going to expect him to lead Torkoal. So whether he's going to switch it up and go for something else to surprise, we'll have to see. But it's hard to not want to lead Torkoal on a team like this. 140 defense, so it's really bulky in terms of its physical defenses. It's super slow, which is actually a great buff for it, in a boon for it in terms of it's gonna win Weather Wars if you send this into if this and like Pelipper are both leads, because of its slow speed, it's gonna win that Weather War. And because of that bulk, it can probably it's not going to go down too quickly, so it can keep setting Sun up if it gets taken down or it times out or whatever. So,
Due to the composition of Jake's team, I don't think we're going to see Torkoal use any of its more offensive sets that it can sometimes use. Because if he wants an offensive drought, he's just going to send out Charizard.
I agree. And one of the problems with Torkoal is, while it does have that physical bulk, you're gonna likely want to run a Heat Rock on it. So to switch it into those stealth rocks for it to rapid spin, it's gonna have to take that incremental damage, and it's 25% because it's a fire type. So I think without any proper reliable recovery, it is prone to getting worn down in that way.
Still, something to watch out for.
Mm-hmm. It's still like almost necessary on this Sun team. So that is certainly far from a bad pick. It's a fantastic Pokemon.
And now, another Sun Team classic.
Venusaur.
Venusaur.
There's not really much to say here. It's got chlorophyll. It's got sun boosted growth. Stab grass poison. He's a Terra Captain, so he can shed some of its weaknesses with those ground and steel types to keep it alive longer, on top of its respectable bulk. Definitely usable. I mean, yeah, what else can you say? It's got synthesis, so it's going to keep itself healthy.
Yeah, and in the Sun, that synthesis has extra synergy to heal 2/3 of its HP.
Yeah. It is... While Walking Wake and Mega Y are like ridiculously powerful wall breakers, Venusaur is likely what's going to do the sweeping thanks to its chlorophyll boosted speed.
The only weakness is if you get rid of the Sun, Solar Beam is the only way it's really hitting hard. It's
Such
got
bombs.
100 special attack, but
Well,
it's
after a growth boost, 2+2 special attack.
oh yeah, but it depends what you're doing.
I mean,
If you can remove the sun, Venusaur becomes a lot less of a
yes,
threat.
Venusaur is
But
probably the Pokemon that takes the hardest hit on this team from losing Sun.
yeah, there's not many ways to remove sun in this draft though, other than using a dance move, and I don't know how popular those are going to be.
We'll have to see. Next, the final photosynthesis Pokemon on Jake's team, Slitherwing. Deceptively, I don't know, I don't want to say deceptively. Initially, looking at the stats, you're like, these seem decent, but it really can operate in quite a few ways. 135 base attack is very nice, and photosynthesis boosted 1.5 attack on top of the fact that it gets stab first impression on a stab close combat, a ridiculously powerful close combat. Slitherwing does huge amounts of damage as if it has that boost. If you want to run Choice Band, it does huge damage. You can run Bulk Up to boost its damage. You can even run Assault Vest is quite common to give it that added bulk to keep coming in and tanking hits and spamming those first impressions.
It has that stab U-turn.
Stab U-turn. Talking about special defense, is slight lack of special defense on Jake's team, so Slitherwing might be one of his best options for taking those special hits with an Assault Vest. And Charizard Mega Y has his best special defense stat, but it's not got amazing HP, and it can definitely get worn down quite quickly.
Now
Unlike
we've got to
Slitherwing.
talk about the flying type disadvantage Slitherwing has, the 4 times weakness.
Yeah, 4 times is tough, but 13 points. It's valid Terra Captain, and he's gone Water and Steel. Obviously, Steel
Both great
resisting
defensive
those.
types.
Both great defense type and Steel resist, turning that 4 times weakness into a resist, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. On to some of the more niche picks that I don't think we are going to see anywhere near as much as those first 6.
Yeah, probably
Fortress.
not, but I think that's fair. Fortress, an interesting pick, considering he's gone a Sun team and then picked Fortress, which is quad weak to fire.
Well, if it's already quad weak, what's an 8
But
times
but
weakness? It wasn't
yes,
going to live those hits anyway.
that was my next point. With Sturdy, it can take one hit, guaranteed anyway. Like if it's dying to a fire move, it's dying to a fire move. It has Sturdy, it can take the hit, and there's no multi-hit fire moves that I'm aware of, at least. It's a sort of cheaper alternative to something like Ferrothorn. It trades any semblance of special bulk for the fact that it gets Rapid Spin on top of all 3 damaging entry hazards, Spikes, Stealth Rock, and Toxic Spikes. It's actually Jake's best slow pivot at a 40 speed Volt Switch, interestingly enough.
Not U-turn. Oh, wow.
That is, yeah, it surprised me when I saw it. But yeah, it's a decent lead, especially when he's opting for a less sun focused team that can nicely hazard control.
I think it is a bit strange having this as well as Torkoal. As I already mentioned, Torkoal's probably not going into its more offensive sets due to Charizard already being a choice for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel Fortress could have been a good backup if Torkoal was going to use those more offensive sets. But
I mean,
without Torkoal being forced into that role, it's...
Torkoal can't pivot is an important thing. And only gets Stealth Rocks. I say only, but Stealth Rocks is the best, well, arguably the best entry hazard. And
it could also use Overcoat in the Smiggle matchup to try and avoid that Spore.
It's true, it's very specific.
But if we want more cheese, it's got counter along with its Sturdy.
Yeah, love a bit of counter. But yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about Fortress there. Indeedy. Indeedee is an interesting sort of low point pick, which is actually like a very usable Pokemon, being one of, I think, two with Psychic Surge. This being Indeedee male, at least. Um, its 105 base special attack becomes a lot nicer when it's using its psychic moves in that
in the
terrain.
terrain.
Expanding Force will hit quite hard uh, once it has that set up. Outside of that, it's quite frail, especially on the physical side. 95 speed is fine, but it's not going to be outspeeding many offensive Pokemon. Psychic Terrain itself is nice to stop opposing priority, I believe. Although it does stop his own Slitherwing from using First Impression.
First impression.
So probably, I won't say anti-synergy, but probably something to take into account when Jake's building his teams.
Well, if he's scared of something coming out and outspeeding Venusaur, he can set up the terrain. Although, yeah, you've got to set up Sun and terrain. How many turns are you really going to get with Venusaur?
Yeah. So, Indeedee definitely, I think, as maybe have niche usage, but we'll see. I mean, it's definitely. I don't think it's a bad 6-point. I think it's quite good as a 6-pointer, but
It's got Aromatherapy and Healing Wish, so it can run a bit of a Cleric set if needed, alongside the Expanding Force to still hit decently hard.
Mm-hmm. I mean, unless I'm missing something, I think that's basically covered it.
Yeah, that's Indeedee.
Oricorio, 4 Pokemon in 1. Very nice little pickup. Yeah,
I don't know. It's 4 Pokemon in 1, but it's not 4 amazing Pokemon in 1. It's 4 slightly below average Pokemon.
Yeah, perhaps. Its stats are not amazing. I mean, a Dancer is not a hugely useful ability, but I mean, Fire Oricorio is going to be good in Sun. So that's always a nice little buff. It gets Quiver Dance.
Quiver Dance, the best boosting move.
Yeah.
Probably in the game.
So it can act as a surprise sweeper. It can basically sort of choose its resistances thanks to being able to choose its typing. So, to a certain extent, obviously. So it's got a bit of variety there. It's got defog. It can pivot at 93 speed, which is all right. I doubt it's taking many hits, but you never know. It could change into I mean, Fire Oricorio has quad resist. Electric Oricorio is, I mean, Electric Flying we know is great typing. Mm-hmm. We'll have to see how Jake uses Oricorio.
I think he's gonna use it when he needs one of its resistances. Otherwise, I don't see him bringing it over the rest of his team. So probably Fire Oricorio is never gonna be bought. But maybe he'll prove me wrong.
I mean, I like Oricorio as a pick. I think having the versatility is valuable. How well it fits into the rest of the team is we'll see.
Strudel, I don't think there's much to say, but it's got Prankster, meaning it's not a completely useless 1-pointer.
Passing mention to Strudel having Prankster and a nice little set of it's got
Prankster Taunt, Prankster Toxic that can't miss.
Taunt, Toxic, and Parting Shot, right?
Switcheroo.
Ooh, Switcheroo
and Parting Shot.
So yeah, I think Jake drafted it last time and maybe never used it, so we'll see. Maybe he finds the niche for it this time, but far from the worst 1-pointer out there.
When you've only got 1 point left, you try and scout for one that has a niche. Yes. And I think Strudel does it. And finally, we are your team.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned everything for Jake, and the last team on the list, my team, the only other team with more than 10 point Pokemon. I've drafted all 12. As you can see from the spreadsheet, I am using my trades as well, trading out Deoxys and Hippowdon through Lucario and a Hydrapple. So that'll
You've
be
got
my
a
team
quite
going forwards.
balanced team. I think your team has the lowest, highest pointer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Zapdos is my top end at 15, so which allows me to have more flexibility in my other Pokemon. I didn't need to draft anything below 3, although, as you know, Wishy Washy, one of my favourite Pokemon, there's one that I've used before. I mean, 3 of the Pokemon in this team are ones that I've used in the Ikea Draft League before, which is perhaps somewhat hypocritical from stances I've had in the past. Archops, Wishy Washy, and Cursula, 3 Pokemon which I used 2 tournaments ago.
You really do like those Pokemon that have those abilities that can massively hinder them.
Yeah. I mean, the original idea of my draft, which sort of fell apart after Pokemon was stolen, was to have Pokemon with just really big stats. So Hoopa U, Tyranitar Mega, Deoxys D, Archops, and Wishy Washy. But some things got stolen and the draft sort of changed it, so it fell apart after that. But yeah, it's definitely a very adaptable team, I think. Looking at it through the same lens of other people's teams, I think I have pretty decent speed tiers. Axelgor is the fastest Pokemon in the draft, I believe, at 145.
Yeah, nothing faster
I've
than that.
sort of it's a little bit of a lack, but in the 145 to 110 speed tier, Axelgor is really fast, but it doesn't hit that hard at base 100. Special attack and stab bug is not great.
Well, it doesn't need to hit hard when it's final gambiting.
That's true. We
One
might get back
key
to
threat.
we might get back to Final Gambit when we go over it. Archops is, I think, a fantastic Pokemon. 110 base speed is very nice, and 140 attack is really good. 112 special attack means it can run physical or special. Very nice. It's not going
That
to take any
140 attack
hits.
is great until it's below 50%.
Yeah, you're not expecting it to take any hits, and if it does, then oh well. It's
got to run boots.
it almost certainly will be running boots. It's got a nice set of moves though. It's got Stealth Rock as you'd expect from a rock type. It's got Defog itself. It's got Roost. Not that I think that's ever gonna really come into play because it's probably dying anyway. It's got Knockoff. It's got Switcheroo. It's got Taunt. It's got a fantastic little set of moves: Stab, Stone Edge, Stab. I guess Dual Wing Beat is sort of the best flying type, but I mean flying's still a decent offensive type, and it has okay coverage as well. But
yeah, the utilization of having all 12 Pokemon on this team is something I feel you've actually taken advantage of here.
Yeah,
Because you're not going to easily be able to picture what team you're bringing each week, whereas I feel everyone else's teams, you have quite a good idea of what you're going to face, meaning it's going to be harder to prep against you.
yeah, and that, in my opinion, is the value of having 2 extra Pokemon. But talking about Archops, we sort of come in halfway through. We'll start with Hoopa. Now,
Yeah.
a Pokemon that's been on my radar for a long time, held back by its quad weakness to Bug and specifically U-turn, which is not necessarily damning, but
it's one of the most popular moves out there.
But with the advent of terrestrialization, being able to Terra into Poison or Fairy to turn that quad weakness into a resist is super nice. And with just colossal 160, 170 attacking stats, you can run physical or special or even both on the same set. Decent HP of 80, like usable, and good special defense. It's let down by the fact that it has crap defense, physical defense that is, and mediocre speed of 80. So it's unlikely going to be able to sweep because it's so slow and weak to physical moves. But as a wall breaker, there's few Pokemon that have quite as much immediate power without having to boost themselves first.
Yeah, this thing is gonna get in front of a wall and just beat it into submission.
And stab knockoff is always nice, especially when boosted by Terra Dark. Um, yeah, not much else to say about Hooper. It hits things
Okay,
very hard. And talking about hitting
and
things very hard, Tyranitar, um, sort of a similar deal. Mega Tyranitar shares that dark typing with Hooper, so it gets that stab knockoff, and with 164 base attack, it hits hard with that knockoff. It can pursuit trap. People talking about
the
Tyranitar
best
being the
pursuit
best pursuit
trappers.
trappers. Yeah, does a lot of damage. It's tanky. It has 100 base HP, which is good. 150 defense, which is really good. 120 base special defense, which will be boosted by 1.5 in the sand that it sets itself. It can take hits really well as long as they're not fighting type, because the quad weakness, similar to Hooper, really hurts it. And on top of that, it is weak 2 times to a plethora of types like bug, fairy, grass, ground, steel, and water, which turn what seem to be amazing defensive stats down a little. Because while we don't have to worry about hidden power, there's still a lot of Pokemon that can cover any of those types. But the amount of damage that it can put out is very nice. It's slightly hindered by the fact that it can't run a boosting item, so what you see is sort of what you get in terms of its attack. I don't think it gets really. I don't think it gets
Well,
sword stance or anything like that.
you say it can't run a boosting item. You're not forced into Mega
That's
Tyranitar, and
true. That's
just
true.
regular Tyranitar is the tried and tested classic. It
I
is
can
something
run
that
base
has
Tyranitar. Yeah, I think put
proven
at the
itself
same
over time.
points as Mega Tyranitar, which it probably shouldn't have been after the change to the Mega rule. But yeah, base Tyranitar also a very good option. I mean, I like Mega Tyranitar a lot more than base, but we'll see. We'll see how I feel about it once I've used it.
Okay,
Lucario will be the next Pokemon there.
so this is clearly going to be your Terra Captain, and I'm willing to
Yes,
bet that one of those types is going to be normal.
it will. Not to spoil it, Ben, but yeah, um, replacing Deoxys D as a Terra Captain, probably normal fighting steel, which is interesting because I've said in
Normal
the
two of the
past
same
I
types.
feel like taking 2 of your own types on a Terra Captain is a bit of a waste. But looking at Lucario, there's not really much else you want from it. It's a priority monster, and normal fighting and steel are its 3 priority types.
It can go physically offensive, it can go specially
Yeah, it's
defensive,
got
so you
great
never quite know what set it's going
mixed.
to have.
It's held back by its mediocre speed, but it doesn't care about speed when you're just pressing a priority move.
Extreme speed.
And Terra Normal Extreme Speed does a lot of damage, especially after a sword stance. There's quite a lot of situations where you can get to that +2 attack, run in that life orb, Terra Normal Extreme Speed, and just clear through the remains, or even perhaps healthy remains of an enemy team. So it's very good in that aspect, and being able to run either attack or special attack is very nice.
I
And
think it's also quite skill expression, got good skill expression, had the justified ability, where
yeah,
you're able to
potentially,
predict
yeah.
the dark switch.
It's not got great defensive stats, and so having to take a hit on top of often running life orb weakens its sweeping power a little bit. But yeah, justified to get a free boost can be sometimes useful.
Or that inner focus immunity to intimidate
Yeah, that's
can
that's
actually
very
help against a
nice.
couple of the Pokemon that we've
And
seen
even
drafted.
even steadfast, you never know, you might get use out of that. I doubt it, but uh, yeah. Was there something else I wanted to mention about Lucario?
I think we've covered a lot of its points. You don't have to reveal all your secrets.
I feel like there was something I wanted to say a second ago, but I forgot what it was. Oh
Well,
well. Oh
the
yeah,
next one
it's
should be quick.
basically the only setup sweeper on my team. Drafted out of a realization that I have a lot of immediate power from some of these Pokemon, but nothing really that can properly set up. So Lucario allows me to sweep.
Well,
Need it.
the next one should be quite quick, seeing as we've already half done it.
Yeah.
Archeops.
I think we basically said all there is to say about Archeops. It's a glass cannon. It hits hard and it hits fast, but as soon as it gets below that 50% threshold, it's not hitting very hard at all. It's still
Into
fast.
wet
It can
sponge.
still use its utility moveset, and running a fully utility Archeops is still useful, because it doesn't care about defeatist. But yeah, it's basically what we said about that. Wishy
Wishy
Washy,
washy.
another favorite of mine.
Wow, look at those stats.
Just crazy stats when it's above 25%. And for
What
a 3-pointer, I love it.
what do its
40,
other stats look like?
45 HP is not great. I mean, it's only 5 worse than Deoxys D Mind. Basically forces you to run 252 HP because EVs have a higher impact the lower your stat is, sort of proportionally at least, which is interesting, and turns it so it can really cover any role you want as long as that role is slow. Because 30 base speed is not very fast, but if what you're looking for is a slow pivot, then that's fucking great. Flip turn will do a decent amount of damage against a lot of Pokemon with 140 base attack. So it's got 140 attacking stats and 135 on its defenses. So whatever you spec it into, it will be able to do well. If you want it to take physical hits, HP and defense, if you want it to dish out a bunch of damage, you can pump that special attack and hit quite powerful surfs. It also gets Ice Beam as coverage as well, and Earthquake. Not the greatest
Now,
coverage in the world, but generally enough.
now the risk is
And it gets Scald.
it being slow. You have a lot of opportunities to activate its schooling ability and turn it into the
Well,
other wishy washy.
that actually doesn't matter because schooling only goes off at the end of turn. So if you go down to below 25%, you're still in big wishy-washy form until the end of the turn. So if you're flip turning or you turning out on that turn, you're still going to hit with your full 140 base attack. And if it ever gets back up above that threshold, then it's back into big wishy-washy form, which is always nice. And this, as you can see, is my third Terra Captain. Ground for a much-needed electric immunity, and Steel is just a good defensive type. Unfortunately, by not being in Gen 9, doesn't get Terra Blast, which is a bit of a shame, but something which I don't think we nearly needed to cover with any other earlier Pokemon.
No, it's just the replacement for hidden power, isn't it?
Yeah. Zapdos. Zapdos, a very nice, well-rounded, usable Pokemon. Similar to Moltres, however, it trades its fire flying typing for an electric flying typing, which I would argue is a lot better. Not having quad weakness to rock, in fact, only having 2 weaknesses, ice and rock, is quite nice, and both of them have great contact abilities. Static is great for spreading paralysis against those physical attacks.
I think paralysis is invaluable with your team speed tiers.
Very true,
Halving that
very
speed.
true. Yeah, Zapdos begins a sort of mix of Pokemon which have been drafted to act as switch-ins for Hooper and Tyranitar counters for the most part. Being able to take those fighting hits that threaten both of those Pokemon, well, Tyranitar most, but it's very nice. It's got just well-rounded, all-round stats. It's got Roost to heal itself back up. 125 special attack means it's not passive. It can hit big thunderbolts. Its Volt Switch is dangerous. Even gets U-turn in case the opponent is running ground types. Gets
You can
Defog.
hit him with the weather ball off of the sand stream for the big rock type
It's
moves.
very true. Yeah, um, yeah. I mean, Zapdos is just a really good all-round Pokemon that can fill several roles, whether be it some sort of pivot or even just going straight boosting that special attack and hitting hard.
Okay, Pheasantipity, one we have seen before,
Yeah, it was on Tom A's team last time.
and I
Uh,
think it quite shone on his
yeah,
team.
I think it was one of the stars, at least for some of those matches. A newer Pokemon, one that I think is a little bit of a bargain at 7 points. Great typing, Poison Fairy. Always nice to have a grounded poison, something we haven't actually covered so far. Really nice sort of mixed defensive stats. It's got great special defense, and its physical defense is certainly usable. 91 base attack is fine, but that's not really why you're running it. Toxic Chain, giving all of its contact moves, all of its moves, in fact, a 30% chance of toxicking the opposing Pokemon, just by virtue of switching in and spamming U-turn to fish for a toxic and then switch out into an answer. It is very valuable. It gets
Or you have Technician on the other side for the dual wing beats, the Poison Tails.
yeah.
It doesn't have as great a move set for Technician,
I don't
but
know how often I'll be using Technician, but it is there. I think Toxic Chain a bit more useful. It can keep itself healthy with Roost. Even sometimes, I'm not sure. I haven't planned on using them yet, but we'll see. It can set up itself. It gets like Calm Mind, even gets Nasty Plot, Sword Stance, and Agility. It gets a plethora of boosting moves. To to go with its Stab, Play Rough, or Poison Jab. Fairy and Poison is a nice set of types to have, and it has decent coverage. But in my opinion, its use as a defensive sort of pivot or wall is very nice. Quad resisting fighting is very good, and there's a dragon immunity, which is always welcome.
okay, well, speaking of coverage, Silvally.
Yeah, talking about sort of flexibility and being hard to prepare for, Silvally can be any type. Now it does 95 base stats across the board is fine. It's not amazing. I mean, Mew makes it work quite well with 100 base stats, and 5 lower is a significant drop, especially for speed. But it's not the end of the world. It is rough that it basically doesn't have an ability or an item slot for the most part, unless you want to run it normal. But multi-attack getting boosted to 120 power this gen, I think Silvally is a little bit overlooked, even though I think it should perhaps be less than 10 points, but I like the Pokemon. And, coverage for any type. It can fill any sort of type weakness that you might be experiencing. It gets some good utility moves. Defog is very nice to have. Parting Shot, as well as U-turn, as its choice pivoting moves. It can spread paralysis with Thunder Wave, not that we're particularly lacking that on this team. And it's sort of a nice little. If I doubt I will see it very much. I doubt I'm going to run it a huge amount. But when it is run, I think it'll be effective as sort of filling the niche that it's looking to fill.
I'm a little upset it's not one of your Terra captains for the double bait in type switching.
I think that's an absolute waste. And plus, I can go Silvally Rock to go with my Sand. And
Okay, let's talk about the
100% accurate 120 base power rock move. Let's not overlook that. Right, Axelgor.
let's talk about the missile.
Yes, 145 speed is crazy on a Pokemon that can set both spikes and toxic spikes, and pivot out with U-turn is very nice. It's not the most adaptable Pokemon in the world. It's not going to hit particularly hard unless you fit it out with those choice specs, because 100 special attack is not amazing on a mono bug Pokemon. But it can do its job, and as you've mentioned and what's been alluded to, base 80 HP is pretty good for turning it into a missile with Final Gambit.
You can pick a Pokemon you don't like and just delete it.
As long as you get the ability to switch in without taking significant damage, yes. Which is perhaps a little bit more of a pipe dream, but we'll see what happens. Final Gambit is just good to use against defoggers as well if you're trying to use it as a lead, because you're almost certainly going to go before them, and by removing yourself, they won't be able to get rid of the entry hazards.
If you weren't faster than everything in the format, I would point out Water Shuriken as a good priority move, but he's
It's
just so fast it becomes kind of irrelevant
it's
at this point.
also on base 100 special attack and not being stab. It's quite weak, and unless you're using it into a Pokemon that is rather weak to water or special moves. But yeah, it's an option.
Now something that could wall special moves,
Hydrapple.
Hydrapple.
Hydrapple, a late addition to my team. Just a pretty good all-rounder Pokemon that can wall, it can sort of not fully wall break, but it can do a big amounts of damage with, Stab Draco Meteor does a ton of damage.
Okay,
Regenerator
well,
is very nice to have.
it's a gambler's dream with Fickle Beam.
Fickle Beam, I don't know if I want to roll the dice that much. We'll see how I feel about it. I mean, when you're running like a nasty plot set, which it gets access to, Fickle Beam is probably the Dragon move of choice over Draco Meteor. But yeah, all round decent bulk, especially on the physical side.
Yeah,
As I mentioned, Regenerator, so it can keep healthy, which is useful on top of the fact that it gets Recover, so it has that to keep itself healthy too. A few usable
it's
coverage
quite
moves.
it's quite often seen with Assault Vest style sets.
Mm-hmm.
Alongside Regenerator, and then you can Giga Drain, you can Draco Meteor, swap it out, swap it back in. And the Body Press isn't bad off of that defense stat either.
Yeah. It does well to sort of cover Wishy-Washy's weaknesses. So those are my slow, bulky guys, I guess.
Okay, well, we have Jellicent
The
next.
penultimate Pokemon. Jellicent is a
I
bit of
like
a...
Jellicent.
I like Jellicent also, hence why I drafted him. It's a mixed bag. It's a good as a sort of... It fills a gap, I guess. Adds a nice little water immunity, in 3 immunities if it's taking water with the ghost typing, water absorb. Also, it has curse body on top of that, and I've already got static on this team as well. So we've got a couple of nice contact moves, and on top of like toxic chain from Serendipity, we're quite good at spreading status. And very, very usable defensive stats. Like 100 base HP is pretty nice. 70 defense is not amazing, but 105 special defense is definitely usable. It's not the most proactive Pokemon out there. 85 special attack. It's not really going to be killing much, so you're really relying on it to press a status move like Will-O-Wisp or Toxic, both of which are very useful, especially Will-O-Wisp that the ghost types get. And then either pressing Hex or just swapping out. It's, I mentioned mediocre 70 defense. With Will-O-Wisp and Strength Sap on this Pokemon, makes it a lot stronger into those physical Pokemon.
I always enjoy a especially defensive Pokemon with Strength Sap.
Yeah.
It just feels like it walls so much.
It works well to spin block. It has good other utility moves like Trick and Taunt.
I've already talked about how I think Water Absorb is a very good ability this draft.
Yeah. Not much else to
And
say about
then
Jellicent.
another specially defensive Pokemon.
Final one, Cursula. One, as I said, another one that I've drafted before on the same team as both Wishy-Washy and Archops. An interesting one. quite good at being a special wall, in so much that while it has mediocre HP at 60, 130 special defense is nothing to sneeze at, although it has a pitiful 50 defense. And
But then
145 special attack
it
means...
has the strength stat.
That's true. However, unlike Jellicent's 70 defense and 100 HP, 60 HP and 50 defense means you might need a couple more strength saps before you're taking those physical hits. It sucks for both Jellicent and Cursor being weak to knockoff. If I could have taken a fourth Terra Captain, it probably would have been Cursor to shed that knockoff weakness. But stab shadow balls do a lot of damage. It has a nice little bit of coverage. Obviously has the utility moves that come with the ghost type, like Will-O-Wisp, like Strength Sap. I think Perish Body is a hilarious ability. That
Gotta get that Whirlpool set going.
Well, it can sort of punish setup sweepers, or at least force them out. It's like a stopgap. Like if I've somehow, I say somehow, if I've let it get to the point where, oh no, I don't have really any other answers for this sweeper, I can activate Perish Body, and it puts them on a timer. There's only so many, I guess, Pokemon I can lose. I'm still going to be in a bad position, but
an emergency
sort of
button
limits.
is there to be used.
And I think sometimes it surprises people with how much damage it can do.
Well, the Ghost is probably the most spammable type out there at the moment. You can just spam Ghost.
Perhaps. I think it's up there alongside like Rock and Ice. But obviously they're all well known to be good offensive types. Overall,
your team is lacking, as you said, the setup sweep, the threat. But I think you can force your opponents into positions using your pivots.
And I think Hooper, the power that Hooper, you and Tyranitar and some of the other Pokemon have to build up incremental damage on opposing teams is quite strong, and it'll probably mean that Lucario will be maybe a common sight. Who knows? We'll see how the team building goes. In terms of types, I do have a few weaknesses. Only one natural resist to electric and fairy and rock, and the rock one being Lucario, who is not very bulky, is a bit rough.
On the team yet?
I've got a week one, so don't have to worry about that.
Oh yeah, you don't even have one chance to use Tip Out on a Deoxys.
No, which I'm not too sad about. However, I've got Terra types. I've got Silvally. I'm not too worried about these types, so we'll see how it goes, basically. And that is the end of all of the Pokemon teams.
A very long video.
How do you feel about it? I think this might be the strongest draft we've had yet overall.
I think every team but one, as I scroll by, has some sort of threat that you have to watch out for, making it quite scary. And I don't think any of them have an obvious answer, which makes it a lot more interesting in team building.
Yeah. So looking at week 1 this Sunday, who are you against?
I'm against Dan.
Okay. So
facing the Dracovish, Chiempao, Chiyu.
We'll have to see tomorrow how the games go.
Well, maybe he'll bring just Altaria, Bastiodon, Xatu. That's the dream.
Anyway, I think we've talked for far too long.
Yeah.
And we'll say goodbye, and hopefully to have an exciting rest of the tournament.
Goodbye.
See ya.